Good evening, welcome to the Town of Wells Planning Board meeting for Monday, January 13th, 2025. First thing I'd like to do is welcome Tina Bacci to the Planning Board. She's a new alternate member. Welcome, Tina. Thank you. Minutes for December 16th. Anyone have questions or comments or concerns on page 1? Page 2? Page 3? Page 4? Or page 5?
Make a motion to accept the minutes as written. Second.
All those in favor? Unanimous, 5-0. Next order of business tonight is public hearings. We don't have any. First one is the development review and workshops before the site walks for Bald Hill RV Park. Is anyone here from Bald Hill? Please introduce yourself.
Jamie Grow with Mainland Development Consultants.
Mike, comments for us?
Yes, we conducted a site walk this past Saturday at 8 AM. It was cold, cloudy, white snow. We had 3 planning board members present. We had the applicant's agent consultant that's here tonight. Also the owner was there. Town staff was just myself, and we had 14 abutters. Just took a head count there as opposed to taking names down, but it was a good turnout and good discussion before the sidewalk started, and then throughout the sidewalk, questions were asked, and applicant and myself tried to answer them. The comments we had from the sidewalk were that introductions were held. The site entrance was staked out and painted on the pavement. The proposals for seasonal sites, no transient or tent sites proposed. Traffic generation was estimated at approximately 15 peak hour trips. There will be an on-site office, on-site staff, and guest parking to be proposed. When we stood at the entrance, we looked at the site distances, and they're tight to what the town requires for site distances, so they need to be measured by the engineer per the methods described in the ordinance. There was also a very significant elevation change at the entrance. The design would be challenging to make that work. I think it was a good 10-foot drop right as you come off the pavement, and that will need to be 2 or 3% maximum slope going in for a fair distance to make sure RVs can navigate that. The main road was walked all the way in through the proposed RV park. There were a few significant trees of note that were observed. There were several large pine trees, but they were bull pine. They had a lot of limbs on them, much larger than the 24-inch, but at the point where they should be removed for safety reasons. Some areas of wetland were observed towards the south end of the RV park proposed. Also, potential vernal pools could be on that site as well, and those should be evaluated in spring of this year to see if they're any of special significance are on the site. Some of the comments that were discussed by people who attended the walk were second access concerns, fire protection concerns, how the utilities would be brought in, sewage disposal, water supply, those were also items discussed. The actual use as a tent and RV park was discussed is when it was allowed in the zone, and it's been allowed in the rural zone for many years. Gravel roads were proposed. Stormwater would have to be evaluated as part of the town permitting and DEP permitting. And someone asked if any of the RVs would be used for short-term rentals, and the answer was no by the owner.
Any comments about the proximity to the actual quarry?
Yes, at the beginning of the walk, a question was raised on whether there'd be a fence between the two uses. And the owner said he hadn't planned or thought through what type of fence he would put up. He knew there was a required 25-foot buffer between the RV park and the abutting property line. But yes, that a safety issue was brought up on that, especially with the vertical drops that are present there.
Any of the planning board have any comments that Mike left out? Okay. So we have for you tonight is report of the site walk, and then, next time we'll start going through plans.
Sounds good, thank you.
Okay. Next item is report of site walks for Founder's Park Community. Dave McKenzie is stepping off the board at the moment as he's a leader of the proposal.
Good evening.
Evening, Dave. All set, Mike?
Yes, at this site walk was held also on Saturday at 9:30 a.m. It was still cold and snowy. The snow had let up a little bit, but it wasn't quite as much as earlier. We had 3 planning board members present, representative from the Founder's Park Committee was present as well, and myself was present.
Excuse me, folks, but the microphones pick up all the sounds, so if you stop the conversations in the audience, please. Thank you. Go ahead, Mike.
No abutters were present for this site walk. All the building corners were well staked and the wetlands were flagged in blue throughout the property. Tree removal will be minimized. There were some nice oak trees observed to be retained to create a good buffer between the town hall and the proposed site. It was discussed of making sure there was some ADA parking in the school parking lot, which would be the closest to one of the main entrances to the building. There'd also be possible sidewalk reconstruction along Sanford Road to accommodate everyone in the area too for pedestrian. A good thought would be to add some bike racks to the site as well. Some wetland impacts will be needed and the stormwater design was in progress. It looked like a fairly straightforward site, just a sizable project, needs some grading and some stormwater work, but looks like it would fit in good on the property.
Anybody else have a comment? Okay, great. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Next item of business is Go Net Speed at Majestic Regency, schedule a site walk. We received it last time. We did receive it at the last meeting, right?
This application? Yes, it was received, but it was, the site walk was held off
Right.
on until we had something in writing from the owner that the other aspects of the property would be addressed as part of this application. And we did receive an email and a letter from the owner giving authority for Go Net Speed to represent the property and bring any concerns back to the owner.
Good evening.
Hi.
Can you introduce yourselves to the public,
My
please?
name's Terry Turner. I work for GoNet Speed. I do the real estate work, and with me is Maureen Hopkins. She's our in-house legal counsel. We're obviously here tonight to ask to have a site walk for the property. I set that up. The last time we were here, there were some things were brought up that the property has some deficiencies and nonconformities. And we felt that maybe we could address some of those at a site walk so we could see if they actually exist. There are 4 site plans or amendments that will be done on this property, 99, 84, 86, and 2010. 2010 was for a gazebo that was never built, so we're dealing with the 86. The planner has brought up some things that may or may not be the case as far as what has transpired on that property. So with the site walk, we could kind of clean that, maybe identify that or others. There are things that haven't been done. I'll admit there's some screenings that haven't been put in. And that needs to be done and that needs to be addressed with the owner, and that's what we will do. We'll address it with the owner to see if they're going to correct it. So we would like to set up that site walk. We are in the process of having an existing conditions boundary survey done. So I guess I would open it up to the board for questions.
So I do have a couple questions based off the comment you made when you were leaving.
What's that?
I have a couple questions for you based off of kind of comments you made when you were leaving.
Yeah.
On the last meeting we were at. So is all your infrastructure already in place? So do you already have fiber pulled to this one location? Did all the poles get swapped out that need to get swapped out to bring you to this one location?
The make ready is being done. I don't know for sure if they've actually put any cables up in the air yet. They're kind of waiting to get this finalized so they can determine where they gotta actually run things to. Like whether they have to come up Old County Road and along Post Road. So that's still in the process, and it depends on this, you know, where we end up with one of these, our location.
So kind of got another one for you.
What's
Do you
that?
have, I have another question for you.
Sure.
Do you have any distance limitations of where this basically site can go?
I was given for parameters, actually originally I wasn't even given wells as a parameter, but I've been given, so, not much further north of Route 1 than, where the Majestic Regency is. And as far as Agunquit south to about the town line with York. And along Route 1.
So other than looking at Majestic Regencies, have you looked anywhere else in that area
I
for a
have
new
looked at-
location?
I have looked at so many other locations, in Wells and Agunquit. It's very difficult to get people, you know, during the summer to address this because they're busy. A lot of the motels and things weren't interested because they have limited, you know, they're not gonna give up a hotel room. But I have probably looked at about 60 different sites.
And the only reason why I'm kinda asking my questions overall is based off your comment of, it sounds like we don't want that broadband internet in the town of Wells.
No, I did not say that. What I said was, I don't know if we'd be able to bring this to the town. I didn't say you didn't want it.
Okay, but along the lines, it's, just wanna make sure that we're doing our due diligence where there's enough commercial buildings between the line in York and Moody.
Yeah, and I have talked to so many different people, they're just, you know, they're not interested. You know, I have other sites that may work, but same problems as this. You know, I have to go and get site plan approval. And, you know, we're getting late in the game.
You do understand that any issues that come up have to be corrected before you can start doing anything.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's gonna be incumbent upon us when we, you know, if the board determines what the issues are, what needs to be done, then we have to work with the property owner to see if they're willing to accommodate it. And I'll put this out, if you know of other places in town that might work, please let me know.
The Wells Chamber of
Chamber
Commerce.
of Commerce parking lot. Town owns the parking lot.
Yeah, the Wells Chamber of Commerce, there's restaurants, which is a little bit north of where you're saying.
Most of the restaurants don't because they're pretty much maxed out for space, and then they have the problem of chewing up parking spaces that they're required to have or don't wanna give up.
Well,
Okay, are you
Chamber
able-
would be ideal for you.
What's that?
The Wells Chamber of Commerce would be ideal. Because it's also sitting right next door to the Spectrum building, where all their equipment is. And you might even talk to Spectrum.
And there's also
It was-
a consolidated site in Agunquit.
The consolidated site, we looked at the motel right there, which is right next to their brick, CO. And that property owner was not interested.
Did you talk to Consolidated at all?
Consolidated is not going to work with us.
We're
We're a competitor.
Yeah.
And we'd love to have been right next to that building, cause right next to that building on was it the Bourne Shore Acres or whatever? Because it's easy access to the poles that are right there. Where is the Chamber of Commerce?
Corner of
Kimball's Lane.
Kimball's Lane and Route 1.
Yeah.
In the New England House Restaurant, 2 doors up. Then you got Kimball's Lane right there.
The problem with most restaurants is they just don't have the space.
Yeah, but it's not a restaurant.
No, what I'm saying is you had mentioned restaurants.
The Chamber of Commerce is sitting there and it's probably a great location. I mean, you do have one issue, you have a mislocated building there. So that means to straighten that mislocated building out, you're gonna have to do a mislocated building appeal. Or the site will still be in violation.
The chamber does?
No, the Majestic Regency,
What building is this that's mislocated?
the one that's sitting in the setbacks.
Yeah, there was one, I think it was one of the cottages done in '86. Well, once we get the existing conditions boundary plan, we'll know for sure, but it looked like it was, just maybe a foot or two into the setback, which we have a way to address. It's not a variance, it's what we call a mislocated building appeal. I think at the previous meeting, you had said, well, there's no way to fix that, but there is. Worst case, you move the building, but it's pretty general practice to just get a mislocated building.
And that would be given by that board with no problem at all, because it's not a fault of the owner now, because the owner now just bought it. So it would be something that needs to be taken care of so that it's, straightened out.
I think we need to have a completed boundary
Yeah,
survey before we get to
yep.
that point. So I guess my thought is, before we set up a site walk, let's get the completed boundary survey, because we don't know what we're gonna be looking at until we have that.
Let's address the building with this so-called infringement into the boundary. The building that was referenced is what is now the maintenance building that was redone in '86. And that's on the amended site plan that was done in '86 for that building. And at the time, the setback was 15 feet, and that's what's mentioned in the planner's report. So, if she's correct in her thing, that it's 15 feet from the property line, that's an acceptable setback for that lot as at that time and place.
I think the question was, it appeared to be less than 15 foot.
Okay, but what it was transferred to me that it is 15 feet.
So again, I guess we need to have the site plan.
Yeah, it might be a non-issue if it meets the 15.
But pending that, that's one issue. There are other issues that supposedly, turnarounds that weren't in place, shrubs that aren't done. I agree, the shrubbery is not done. It might be beneficial to have that site walk. As part of that site walk, a condition is you need to demonstrate that that building is not
Well,
is
there's a lot of
encroaching
other
on that
issues.
15 feet.
You realize that's not the only issue, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, I've got the whole list.
Okay, and all those defaults would have to be completely corrected prior to any action being taken by GoNet, right, to even it.
Absolutely, you have
Okay.
to be in
We just wanna make
conformance
sure
with
you
everything.
understand, okay.
No, we're not just gonna go in and build it and, then go ask for forgiveness. But I think it's critical if we could do that site walk, so you can identify things, and when Sebago goes out to do their existing conditions, I can make sure they know what you guys have brought up, and ladies.
The only thing is we won't know where the lot line is, right?
Not until the survey, but on the site walk,
We can do the sidewalk. I just
yeah, we
don't
can still
know
do
about
the
the
site walk without knowing whether it's 14 or 15 feet. But as long as you're aware
Right.
that that might be an issue.
And you wanna make a motion on a sidewalk?
You wanna do the first at 8?
No, we wanna-
What's that? What date?
The first at 8?
First?
Yeah, it's a Saturday.
Yep, okay.
Is there another date in mind for you?
No, that's fine.
So I'll make a motion to do the site walk February 1st at 8 AM.
We have a second,
Second.
all those in favor? Great,
You forgot one thing,
I forgot one thing,
well, the board did. Can do, weather permitting.
oh, that,
We walk in
That's
the
a good one,
snow.
Yeah.
You're not gonna have snow?
I said we walk in the snow.
Oh, you do?
No.
It's Saturday.
yeah, but it is weather permitting.
Yeah, if there's more than a couple inches of
Right,
snow on the ground, we typically don't do them.
I mean, the one thing that would be hard to determine is the gravel or parking and things that, the buildings are pretty self-evident.
Yeah, if there's snow on the ground, it will get canceled.
Okay,
And you're gonna have to stake out where you wanna put
it
your,
is staked out now, well, it's staked and it's pinned. Snow might make a problem for the pinning, but the stakes are there.
great, thank you.
Thanks.
Next order of business tonight is Starbucks. We need to get a motion to receive the site plan application, schedule a site walk.
Make a motion, we receive the site plan application.
Can I get a second? All those in favor? That was Josh that made the second. He's very soft spoken tonight. Anybody here from Starbucks?
So what's that?
Starbucks?
Yes.
Or Trillium, whatever you wanna call it, it's under Starbucks.
Starbucks is good, thank you.
Did you already vote to receive it?
Yes.
We did vote to receive it.
Yeah, we second.
Thank you. I was unclipping my packet.
Okay. Gentlemen, introduce yourselves, please.
Yes, Eric Doobie, president of Trillium Engineering.
I'm Patrick Donahue, president of Five Star Auto Sales, I'm sorry, Five Star Holdings. I'm used to calling it that, it's our old business.
Okay.
We're the owner of the property.
Would you like to explain to the public what you wanna do?
Yes, let me get some up here, sorry.
One question, Mike, should they discuss both issues at the same time?
That might be more efficient, yeah, because the next two applications are really joint. One is the site plan for the new use in Starbucks, and the other is to remove this portion of the property from the original Wells Plaza, so yeah, I think it'd be good and efficient to
So,
do both at
So
once.
can I get a motion to receive the Wells Plaza B33 Plaza 2 application?
so moved.
Second. All those in favor? Great, so it would be easier for you to explain the entire process rather than one piece and then have to do the next, because we have questions on both, so.
We appreciate that, so I think it'll go a little bit smoother, so. Thank you, appreciate it. So we're here, taking a look at the existing, we'll just call it the Hannaford site. Most people probably understand, you know, the entire site of what happens over at the Wells Plaza. So we basically have the existing Hannaford complex with other buildings in this side of the site. And then we have Route 1, that's essentially here. We have Mile Road, that's essentially up here. Existing car wash at the intersection that is there. And then of course we have this basically empty parking area that we're talking about here. So basically the owners have taken a look at this site and said, you know, this makes a perfect opportunity, gets you off Route 1 for traffic, but for Starbucks, as we probably all know, Starbucks is one of those facilities that tends to have a lot of stacking needs for traffic. So getting them off major roads like Route 1 or these other routes around the state, I think is pretty good. So in this case here, we're talking about having the building in this location here. And then we're talking about having the entrance here for both parking, adjacent parking for people that wanna pull in. And of course, we have the stacking lane that goes all the way around for the actual drive-through itself. So the site right now is essentially impervious. And so we're actually reducing the amount of impervious. We'll be adding plantings in locations around the site. And then have, you know, have some other green areas there. We'll have some dedicated trash and then utilities. We're working on utilities to be able to connect to essentially connect sewer and water out here within, not within the right of way, but we're working with neighbor on that. And then we'll have essentially lighting for the site. We're again working on that. We'll have some building mounted lighting, and then we'll have a little bit of parking mounted lighting, be cutoff fixtures to meet dark sky regulations and things like that. So, so the site plan amendment process is also because this is part of that larger site itself. And so we're amending essentially this area again, that essentially older parking lot that will be changed into to what our site's under a previous site permit. So that's what that's the second part of this. So, and then with, I think we just saw the elevations. I'm not the architect on the project, but that's one of the things we've been working with Starbucks corporate and then local, our local representative, which is Woodhull, Patrick Booth. And so that's essentially, you get a good sense of what we're looking for the actual building itself. so. So that's essentially it, what we're trying to do, so we're happy to go through, answer questions, go through checklist.
So which part are you trying to break off as a separate lot?
Essentially, that piece right here that we're looking at, which is this rectangle piece,
That's that right there.
so right
And
there.
why do you wanna do that? Is it gonna be big enough to build anything else on eventually?
No.
No, right?
No, that's, I believe it's a 33,000 square foot lot that would be broken off from the Wells Plaza. And it's to have it on its own separate lot and separate ownership versus part of the plaza.
And who would own it?
We were Five Star Holdings.
And
We've
who's
done a
gonna own the
few of these.
Starbucks site?
What's that?
And who owns the Starbucks site?
We have a purchase and sales agreement with the owner of the plaza,
So the question again is, why do you wanna break off the 33,000 square feet?
because we're separate ownership from the rest of the plaza. We don't own the plaza itself, that's owned by an RTA out of Florida, and they're selling us this out parcel,
Are they selling it to you as two parcels or one?
one parcel.
But you wanna separate it?
We would
No,
be
I think
separated, cause we're.
They're
owned
separated from the
by-
plaza,
Right.
so they're gonna be their own little island
Okay.
surrounded by the plaza.
The
Is that the best way to describe it?
Okay.
That is the best way to describe it.
Yes.
And it would have, street frontage on Route 1 that would meet the ordinance. It's actually got street frontage along an old private street called Edgar Ave that runs along this side of the adjacent property. One of the questions we had in our memo was, we need to have street frontage for the remaining land, for the actual plaza. And it has 80 feet up here at the entrance where the light is. And it would actually have 65 feet of street frontage on the old private street known as Edgar Ave. So if you add the two street frontages together, the remaining land can meet our street frontage requirement. But it means that this old private street would have to remain to meet that standard.
And that's not part of this.
It has to be part of this review because we can't create a non-conforming lot.
Okay.
And that's another aspect, we brought it up in our memo, was that currently the overall site meets our lot coverage requirement because the lot is so big. It includes a lot of land area to the east of the existing plaza that no one sees, but there's large vacant part of the parcel here. So the overall parcel meets our lot coverage. If you break off the front and create a lot line here to create this lot, they have the proposed lot coverage at 66.2%, I believe it is. Very close to our ordinance, maximum of 65. So they'd have to find a way to meet that 65%. It's very close as it is, so they'd have to find a way to do that.
So question, Mike, so that would be, are we looking at two different site plan amendments, one for this project and then one for the reduction? So then the whole Wells Plaza would have to be looked at.
Correct, and that's the purpose for the two applications, cause we're having a new site plan approval for the new Starbucks site, but we also have to amend the existing site plan for the existing Wells Plaza.
So I have a follow-up for Steve's question there. Is that easement through the Hannaford Plaza parking lot permanent conveyance with that site so that if it's traded again in the future, whatever future user or owner there is still has that easement through the plaza rather than coming off Route 1?
Yes, the only way to access the Starbucks property would be through the plaza itself.
In perpetuity.
Yes,
Mike,
because they'd never be able to get an entrance onto Route 1 separately for the site,
Right.
so they'll have to draft an easement across the Wells Plaza
To convey
property,
with
not
that.
not a street, but at least an access easement.
Mike, isn't that a street that goes down that backside?
It stops right here, there's a little L to it, right here.
No, I'm saying, I thought that was a road that went down and around and out to the back.
On the
At one
on the tax maps, it actually shows a right of way going through the middle, and it has a name on it. But it's never been a street, other than on the tax maps, it's never, I think it was done for address purposes for 911.
Okay.
So that each of these shops could have a separate address. But it's never been a street that could be recognized by the town as a street. And there are cross easements between the Wells Plaza site and Hannaford. And they've been negotiating and working with Hannaford representation for the changes.
That's a better solution than the one you tried across the street, so.
I think that
It was a different
now
company
that-
at the time.
That wasn't you,
But it
that was
wasn't
a
Trillium.
different.
That was not
It was Starbucks.
It was Starbucks, but it was a different franchise owner.
correct.
Okay.
That's what we've been told.
So, we can have this staked out. You need the building staked, you need the boundary staked.
I think-
Parking areas, what else do you
I
need
think
staked?
staking the building's gonna be hard, cause they're on pavement.
I know, but they could,
They can
You
drill a
put
hole.
pins.
Pins, yeah.
No, we'll take care of that, not an issue.
So I do have one question. You have a 6-foot stockade fence, is that gonna run the entire length of that property line?
It's in place,
What's that?
isn't that in place already?
I
You're
think,
talking about up here?
I think we were recommending a 6-foot stockade fence
Well-
in this area, because there is a residential use on this lot.
Right.
This is commercial up here.
But my concern is so the people don't come down through that, the parking lot for the laundry and zip in through, head on into the cars that are coming that way now.
You're talking about right here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that will be closed off with essentially with pavement and with plantings and things like that, so. That's a great idea, we'll make sure that,
Yeah, because
Whatever
I can
we
see
do.
people, there are people that use it now, when the light's red, they go in through the laundromat, down
Sure.
over the hill and out through the drive.
yeah.
No one does that.
you probably do.
Actually, I never have.
We will make sure one way or another, we're gonna have some access that's blocked, because the last thing we need is somebody coming in here and somebody pulling in, trying to do some head-on issue.
Yeah,
So,
that's what I'm looking at, is a head-on situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Alright, anything else for that site walk? I'm sorry, you guys talking about building staked?
Well, the entrances, we wanna see where the
Entrances,
entrances are.
It's great that you got over 20 cars for stacking for the drive-through.
Yeah.
That's the most we've ever been able to stack on any Starbucks site.
Really?
We've got one in Saco that's 9 right now, we can't seem to fit any more.
During the summer, you're gonna need it.
Uh-huh. Anything else besides that for site
You
walk?
can just check with Mike if you need anything else staked, he'll tell you. Okay.
Yeah, and hopefully it won't snow. I mean, the weather prediction is still good going into a couple of weeks and you'll be able to just paint the market on the pavement, but.
We'll see what happens. It was spitting snow tonight, so.
So,
You wanna stick with the first, or is that
yeah, how long is it gonna take us at the Majestic
that's 30 minutes?
sequence?
An hour?
30, an hour?
Yeah, gotta
Call it an
figure at
hour,
least an
call
hour.
them
You really
9:30.
think it's gonna take an hour?
Well, the problem is you're not gonna have the as-built, so we're gonna have to go through everything, but when they did the hotel licensing go through, they have a list of items already, don't they?
That's where the original, on that other property, that's where our list of possible violations came from, was licensing review, but.
So we do have a place to start.
Mhm.
So 45 minutes,
So make a motion, the site walk at the proposed Starbucks at 8:45 on February 1st.
let's give us
9
time to
o'clock.
get there, 9 o'clock.
Okay, 9:00.
Second.
All those in favor? Great, so see you on February 1st, weather permitting at 9 AM.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next item is adult use cannabis, land use text change application. Evening, how you doing?
Good evening, good.
Wanna introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, my name's Joel Pepin, I'm the applicant, owner of Jar Consulting.
Welcome, Joel. Mike?
Yes, at the last planning board meeting, we were presented new information that was requested by the board on different testing requirements for the various marijuana uses that are allowed in the state for medical versus, I think, adult retail use. And the testing requirements are appear to be much stricter for adult use versus medical, and the board wanted to see information on that, because that seems counter of what it should be, but if that's the case, it's the case. So that was some information the board was to look at and review, and if you had any more questions, have the applicant address those. Also under the ordinance text changes themselves, I had added some sections for performance standards that were out of the Elliott ordinance, that the board was interested in seeing incorporated into our ordinance. So in your packet is the memo that describes the information that was provided at the last meeting and a copy of proposed text language to the ordinance. So if the board wanted to review both of those things and give comments. And, you know, in general, you know, we have the 6 criteria for any zoning application change that the board should think about. We did get a couple of written comments from people in town that were on the table in front of you that came over and emailed over the weekend. So we didn't have it for your packets on Friday, but a couple on the table tonight that came in with concerns on adult use being added to the town and the impact to youth and just the town in general. But if the board wanted to go from talking about the additional information in ordinance language, we could move into the 6 criteria and talk about each of those and think about what recommendation you'd be making to the board of selectmen. Maybe we could finalize at the next meeting, or we could work on tonight, but I was more thinking you would discuss it tonight and then continue it to the next meeting so we could do some written recommendations that you could review in detail before submitting it to the board.
So I had a few questions. I looked at the information, unless something was missing from my packet. You talked about the differences between the amount of the product that was rejected due to not meeting standards. But you didn't provide us with a threshold of those standards. So we don't know, the data's incomplete, it doesn't really mean anything. You need to know what the threshold standard is. For example, you know, I mentioned last time, you need to know, you know, certain of these chemicals are carcinogens. You need to know what the standard is, how many parts per million or parts per billion. And then the information that you gave, it can make some sense, but basically the information is incomplete. The other thing that, and I was looking at this, one of the residents sent in about, talking about the drug abuse in Maine, and it seems that according to this, the teenagers in Maine are 47.44% more likely to have used drugs in the last month than the average American teen. And I don't think it's any secret to anyone that there's a drug problem in Maine. And I guess I just don't see how adding the availability or adding the ease of getting recreational marijuana is gonna help that fact. And I'm sure you can sit here and say, well, you know, it's for adult use, it's not for kids. Well, alcohol is for adults too, it's not for kids. But what happens is the kids find a way to get it, and I'm concerned that that's what's gonna be the problem here. It also references our comprehensive plan, and this would be, you know, as it states in this letter here, would be contrary to the comprehensive plan. I don't think the comprehensive plan says that we wanna make Wells a marijuana destination, and that seems to be what we would be doing, is offering availability so that people would drive from towns around to Wells to partake in recreational marijuana.
I believe Algonquin in York are just medical only, correct?
York is, I'm not sure about Algonquin actually. I think it's just medical in Algonquin too, but
Okay.
I'm not positive on that.
What about North Berwick?
North Berwick, there isn't any.
Right,
Berwick, there is.
but North Berwick is what the board says.
And I think one of the biggest factors against making the ordinance change is the fact that we currently have no method of, we have drug alcohol tests, the breathalyzer test, if you get pulled over and find out if someone's driving under the influence of alcohol. We don't have that capability with marijuana. And so by allowing people to drive to these locations, and you can put up, I'm sure, as many signs as you want that say, you can't partake of marijuana on the premises. But once they leave the premises, there's nothing stopping them, and we have limited tools in enforcement once someone leaves. Until we get to the point where we have, I guess, a standard that we can follow in terms of how to determine whether someone's driving under the influence of marijuana, or until we get to the point where the federal government has approved the sale and use of marijuana as they have with alcohol. I think it's incumbent upon us to limit it to those people who need it for medical purposes.
Well, I'd like to bring up the fact that when this first came up and we voted for medical marijuana only, the voters in the town was the understanding that it would be one location allowed in the town based on the state language at the time, state law language. And then the state changed their language without notifying us, and we ended up with 3 locations. Because we already had the one approved, and then there was 2 other applications that had been submitted due to the language change, and when it was changed, we agreed to the 3. The town voted on that as well. And again, we voted to keep it to medical marijuana. Truthfully, what I'd like to see language in here is if one of these places closes, we should revert and eliminate the license and go back to try to get down to the 1. If we're gonna change the ordinance, we should change it all the way to what the voters originally thought they were voting for. And I still think it should be medical only. Anybody else have comments, questions?
I have a comment. One of the things that we have heard all the way through was the fact that medical marijuana is not as good as recreational marijuana in testing. So I'd like to see us, Mike, ask the selectmen to notify our state representative and see if we can get a change to the medical marijuana standards to make them meet or exceed the standards for recreational use.
I could comment on that.
Sure.
There is a push right now amongst many members. I'm an operator in the industry, medical and adult use licensee. Also president of the Maine Cannabis Industry Association. So for the past 5-6 years, I've been involved in a lot of the policy work up in Augusta, really since 2015-16. And I've been one of the stakeholders that's paid attention to the medical marijuana laws and the adult use cannabis laws as they've developed. The medical community for the first time this year, I'm sensing, is more in support of tracking and testing in the medical program than I've personally ever seen before. In years past, there's a lot of small scale medical producers that are very worried about the increased cost of testing every batch, like we have to in adult use cannabis, and are worried about those testing costs putting them out of business. And so the standards in the medical program that have been talked about, tracking and testing, have been blocked and stalled because so many of the industry have come forward in Augusta saying that they'd go out of business as a result, and that message has been effective to the representatives and the senators up in Augusta. There was only one way to launch the adult use cannabis program here in Maine. I wanna just remind everybody, in 2016, the people of Wells did vote in favor of recreational cannabis. It was close, but they did vote in favor for it. And it took 4 years before we had a regulatory framework that was actually approved by the legislature to launch the program. And that regulatory framework at the time had to override Governor Paul LePage's veto, who was very against recreational cannabis. And so the only way to launch adult use cannabis in the state of Maine was with a high level of regulation. So we have testing and tracking for every batch, and I can talk about all of the standards for the testing. I didn't wanna there's a lot of information I could throw at you guys, and with respect to your time, it is incomplete, but I was trying not to overwhelm you with the data, and I can talk about all that. So that's sort of where we are. Medical marijuana has been legal in Maine since 2010, 2011, and there's an industry that's formed and has become loud and vocal in Augusta about the regulatory burdens associated with increased tracking and testing. But the reason I believe that the medical community wants the testing is because they're competing with illicit cannabis products that are coming from out of state that are riddled with pesticides, and it's very cheap. And so,
And again, that's why I think we need to, as a community, we need to speak to Augusta and also try and get our surrounding communities to do the same thing.
correct. So, in the adult use program, which we have 7 adult use stores and 1 medical right now, we, as adult use licensees, we don't compete with illicit cannabis coming from other states, because there's no way for it to enter the state's tracking system. And so in terms of like some of the microbials, the state for cannabis has a 10,000 CFU threshold for yeast and microbials. And then I can talk to you about all the thresholds, the parts per million for the different pesticides. The issue with all this is there's testing standards that the adult use industry has to play by, but because it's illegal federally, no one really has data to say, is it 10,000 CFUs of microbials that's okay in cannabis, or should it be 100,000? And that's a debate right now that's happening up in Augusta, because 10,000 can be pretty hard, especially if you're an outdoor farmer, to keep, and some of the microbes aren't bad for consumption, but some are. Medical doesn't have any of those standards. So what you see on in the medical side, and it is sort of backwards logic, but there is just a higher failure rate for pesticides, heavy metals, and microbials. Couple things I just wanted to say, if I may, I feel like there's this perceived accessibility issue to youth consumption when you start talking about adult use cannabis. And, one of the things that's, I think, hard for us to wrap our heads around, and what I'm trying to do with providing some of this information, is to sort of rethink that. And truthfully, there's also data, and I reviewed everything that came in over the weekend. There's a lot of data that suggests, as adult use cannabis laws have been active in other markets and here now for a handful of years, that it is correlated to decrease in youth consumption over time. Adult use cannabis licensees, we're the ones who check IDs, like there's illicit cannabis, and there has been illicit cannabis forever. There's medical cannabis, and then there's recreational cannabis. And the Office of Cannabis Policy in Maine put out a study in 2022 that said the regulated cannabis industry, adult use licensees and medical licensees, have done more to decrease the illicit cannabis market in the state of Maine than any other method that the state of Maine's ever tried in the war on drugs, or specifically cannabis. And so it's a bit counterintuitive, but there's a bunch of data here. Just a couple of things, like in a report produced by the Office of Cannabis Policy, or released by the Office of Cannabis Policy in 2022, produced by Advocates for Human Potential, they basically analyzed the cannabis market in the state of Maine from all sources. And they found that when accounting for the first time since the first adult use stores had opened in Maine, the current in-state illicit market is smaller than most other states with adult use cannabis laws, suggesting that Maine is effective in curbing the illicit market at a greater rate than most other states. Just a few other things to talk about, points that have already come up. This report found that if you live in a zip code with at least 1 adult use store, the data suggests that it's associated with a significant increase in how much cannabis is obviously sourced from a regulated store, suggesting the presence of just 1 store will incentivize consumers to access their cannabis through the regulated market. Zip codes that don't have an adult use cannabis store demonstrate moderate to high levels of willingness to pay for it, and may present relevant locations for future adult use stores. And then I thought this was also pretty interesting in this report. Analysis of all Maine zip codes, statewide data showed greater reliance on accessing cannabis through dealers and medical sources related to greater cannabis use disorder and driving under the influence, but accessing cannabis through adult use stores did not relate in either negative health outcome. So you talk about this data here too. The same rate, almost the same rate of youth cannabis consumption, it's very similar to youth alcohol consumption, but we sell alcohol everywhere. But we start talking about adult use cannabis in town and everybody,
Alcohol is federally approved and allowed, and it's federally regulated,
sure,
okay?
and it was
So-
banned, it was
So,
banned
and
for a
I'm
time.
saying right now that cannabis is not. So, you know, maybe the thing is come back to us once, and that's probably happen in the next few years, the way things look like they're heading. But until it is, and again, you know, you've gotta look at the statistics on drug abuse in Maine. And according to the information provided here, and I can give you this,
He's got it.
oh, you've got it, that the amount of drug use among teens has increased since marijuana became available through medical or through recreational use. Now, I guess I would wanna ask you, Joel, and this is just a question going back to, you're saying that you're acting like everyone in Maine is for recreational use of marijuana. What are the names of your stores in the not in the area, but in the rest of the state?
All the same name, Jar Cannabis Company.
Okay, so I guess the question that I have is, you applied for the medical marijuana license and were approved to have that, but nothing has happened yet.
No, a lot's happened, excuse me, a lot's happened, the building hasn't started construction.
Right, I know, right now it's a laydown yard for Scott Construction, which is doing a bridge project which won't end until the middle of the year. So probably until after, my guess is after the middle of the year, nothing's gonna happen. Are you planning on building that facility if this ordinance gets rejected?
We're gonna build a facility regardless, yes.
Okay.
Excuse me, one thing I wanted to mention too, and I didn't read in the data that this was at the same time frame as when cannabis went legal here in the state, but there was a study published in JAMA Pediatrics that found cannabis use amongst teens did not increase after legalization, and in some cases, in certain states, it decreased.
Yeah, but in the state of Maine has, and again, if you read this, state of Maine has a terrible drug problem relative to the rest of the state. So why give the opportunity to make it worse? Why not, you know, you can't say that by making marijuana more accessible, you're gonna solve the drug problem.
What I'm saying is, having regulated cannabis stores, we're the ones who check IDs, we're not the illicit ones selling to minors.
Right, and I understand, and liquor stores check IDs too, and yet kids wind up with liquor.
Sure.
And they're getting it through their friends, through fake IDs, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's almost impossible to keep alcohol out of the hands of minors unless that minor decides that they don't wanna deal with it. And so I guess what I'm saying is, why give another opportunity, another avenue for additional people to have it, additional opportunities for children or minors to acquire it? And I just don't think that's what Wells wants.
I have a couple of responses. One thing I wanted to say, Brian, in response to the comment you made, in Wyndham, we have a medical and adult use storefront, and Wyndham wrote their ordinance in a way that you suggested, whereas I believe there's 9 grandfathered medical stores in Wyndham, but there's only 4 licenses approved. And if 9 or 8 or 7 stores, the 9 or 8th or 7th, as they go to business, and I think 1 or 2 maybe have, no new ones can open up until they get down to 4. So I just wanted to say Wyndham has some language in regards to that.
There you go, Mike.
Yeah, before I forgot about that point. You know, it's the other thing that's happening, and it's through a loophole, and I don't think it's right, is the hemp derived THC that's psychoactive, that's being sold in gas stations and grocery stores. And basically, there's no main prohibition against intoxicating hemp THC, which is the same chemical compound in the cannabis THC. There's no and so you have, yeah, it's federally illegal, but they're taking millions of dollars from taxes from our industry, and they're allowing this loophole through the Farm Bill, where intoxicating hemp's being sold through Cumberland Farms and through gas stations. The distributors, alcohol distributors, 4 of them at least in the state of Maine, are distributing the same THC compound that we're regulated through the nose on. And so it's just, I think in terms of the drug problem in Maine, if you look at just worldwide, youth rates when it comes to alcohol consumption and binge drinking rates. My wife is from Brazil, and culture when it comes to alcohol consumption is completely different than what we have here in the United States. And it's got a different stigma around it. And I think part of this conversation is about the stigma around cannabis. And in other countries, counterintuitive that even have, and I'm not advocating this for us here, but in terms of thinking outside the box, other countries around the world with lower drinking rates, where it's not as taboo, there's not this forbidden stigma associated with the alcohol. It's correlated in some of those countries with much lower rates of youth abuse of alcohol and binge drinking. And I think there's just the stigma around alcohol and around cannabis, being that it is illegal and you can't have it till you're 21. And it's like got this allure where kids want to get into it and have fun with it. And I think over time it's like, this is for adults and cannabis isn't for kids. And I think there's this perceived.
I agree with you, it's not for kids, but like, for example, when pull up to a stoplight and all you can smell is cannabis, someone is operating a vehicle and using. And until we have a way to determine if someone's driving under the influence, we certainly don't want to introduce people to go drive somewhere to pick it up and then drive home. Right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, but medical marijuana, you can call up and have it home delivered.
For adult use cannabis, you can have it home delivered in Wells right now, but you guys don't want us to open a store.
Yep.
But you could have it delivered to your house. And medical too, yes. Or illicit cannabis, we could have it delivered here right now if we wanted to.
So there is no point then in opening a store because you can deliver it. There's no point in changing the ordinance for the license because right now you can already deliver. That takes the driver away from driving somewhere to get it and driving home.
The issue with the adult use delivery is it's a new feature to the adult use cannabis program. And you have to record body footage. All adult use cannabis transactions need to be on video, whether it's at store or through delivery. So you need body cams. You gotta walk into someone's house with a camera on. There's privacy concerns around that. And the way that you have to handle the paperwork and the transferring, it's no operators are doing it, or maybe 1 or 2 have tried that I know of, and they've gotten out of
One
it.
down the street's doing it.
Medical, yeah, but adult use are the regulatory standards are just much higher. We're moving forward regardless with our medical building.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to continue to provide more information on all this stuff, and I sense some personal bias against cannabis in general, which is completely understandable. I'm really here just to remind myself and everybody that we followed the town's process to change the ordinance, and I'm just hoping that we can go through this process, determine whether or not we've done the process correctly, and I'm just asking ultimately if we can let the voters decide.
Well, I guess based on, and I'll reference the comprehensive plan, it doesn't address it. So, I would say until such time as that's addressed in the comprehensive plan, until such time as there's a way to establish whether or not a person's driving under the influence, I think that the best thing to do is to leave things as they are. And I would be happy to make a motion that we forward it back to the selectmen recommending that they not change it.
I think what we really need to do is let Mike go through the wording again, and come up with the reasoning that we would be recommending it not. I mean, we've got the information we have on youth use, but we also have to consider the comprehensive plan, and I think there's some arguments there.
Yeah, and the, you know, the basis for putting it on the ballot is meeting the 6 criteria of section 145D,
Right.
6D. And, you know, the criteria is the proposed amendment will not materially be detrimental to public welfare or interest to the subject property if it was map related, zone related, or properties in the vicinity. So a lot of the items I hear you describing sound like your opinion may be that it is detrimental to the surrounding community and the town in general.
You have to remember, it is a vacation location for families as well, right? It's not just adults that are here all the time, so.
And the
maybe
comp
it's
plan does
detrimental to
talk
them.
about encouraging family recreational, you know, use of the town and the beaches. Which a lot of families might not consider this, you know, cohesive with that. Other criteria is the proposed amendment is warranted because of a change in circumstances or because of a need for additional property in the zoning district. We have medical allowed and we have 3 of them existing and approved, 2 existing. The subject property is not suitable for development in general conformance with the zoning standards. That one really doesn't apply. They do have an approved site, but they would have to make changes to it to meet the criteria that the board has discussed to date. But that's more for a different type of zoning application. The property shall have the ability to be serviced by adequate facilities, including roads, water, fire protection, sewage disposal. Although those conditions can be met anywhere on Route 1. The proposed amendment is in accord with the Wells Comprehensive Plan. You did touch upon that and have concerns. Marijuana is not, you know, the comp plan dates to 2005. So that's prior to it being legal for medical use or adult use. So it's silent on it. But there are other aspects of the comp plan that you can look at where you don't consistent with it. And the last criteria is the proposed amendment complies with all other applicable regulations of the town and with all state and federal statutes. It's not legal federally. There is the Cole paper, I believe.
The Cole memo.
The Cole memo.
Yes.
Which just states it's still illegal federally, but if a state has allowed it legally, then the federal government won't pursue legal action or
Can't use federal resources, yeah.
against it. It's still technically illegal, but there's the Cole paper that says that you can operate without the federal government coming after you, basically.
Yeah.
So basically,
Does our actual requirement say that it has to meet state and federal statutes in our
In order to have a zoning change go forward.
Yeah.
And the decision is the Board of Selectmen's. The planning board conducts the first public hearing and makes a recommendation back to the Board of Selectmen. Board of Selectmen are gonna read your recommendation and they're gonna revisit each of these 6 criteria. And if in their opinion it meets it, they can put it on the ballot for the voters to decide. But if in the opinion of the Board of Selectmen, it fails on any of those 6 criteria, then they're not supposed to put it before the voters.
So right off the bat, we fail on the fact that it doesn't meet federal statutes. I mean, we can't change that wording in the ordinance. The selectmen can't change that wording in the ordinance. So this technically can't go forward.
Well, we have to make a recommendation one way or the other, but.
No, I understand that, but I'm
we're gonna
saying,
make the recommendation based on those.
based on those things, so
Mike has to
technically
write
it
it
can't
down.
go forward.
But you need to write it up, and also I am interested in that language from Wyndham.
Yes.
Can I just add one more thing? I just wanna make the comment that I'm not gonna speak for law enforcement, but this conversation about detecting sobriety of drivers or drivers under the influence of cannabis. Law enforcement does have tools and there are field sobriety tests. I mean, it would be great to maybe see if Wells PD's been trained some of this, but there's even saliva testing that can be done. The tricky thing so that there are tools for law enforcement to determine if someone's under the influence of cannabis while driving. The issue is that alcohol, there's a set limit of alcohol in your blood that is obvious. In cannabis, it's like someone could have consumed last night but could be fine today and it could still show up in a way.
System for up to 30 days.
Yeah, it's in your system for up to 30 days. But there are field sobriety tests that they can do in the moment to detect if you're under the influence or not, so.
So if you reference FMCSA, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, they talk in great detail about it.
Mhm.
And basically, the only, there's only two tests that they accept, and that's blood and hair.
And then, you know, the last thing I wanted to say as well, like, in terms of, one of the standards you mentioned, but like bringing down the standard of living for people in the community, I mean, I get it, Wells is a vacation destination for a lot of families, especially in the summer. A lot of communities are in the state of Maine, and so is Sunday River and Sugarloaf, and they've got adult use cannabis stores. You've got Augusta that's just opted into adult use cannabis in the last 6 months. Biddeford just did in the past year and a half. These communities, and Biddeford, actually, they're interesting because they are governed by a town council and they've had medical retail stores for a number of years. And their council formed a committee to review the burden of the medical retail cannabis operations that have been existing in Biddeford. And they found no additional burden on town police or resources. And they felt as though it should be treated like any other business. So I just wanna mention, like, there's a lot of towns that allow this and they haven't deteriorated.
I think that, I mean, we will beat this around pretty good, so. So I'd like to get a motion for a continuance.
So what do you want to do?
Continue for 30 days, so Mike has time to.
Make a motion to continue this for 30 days?
Second.
All those in favor? Okay. So, I mean, and don't forget, Joel, we don't get the final word on this, I mean, we just make a
Yeah, we just make
recommendation to the select board,
recommendations.
and
Yeah.
they're the ones that will make a determination on it. And obviously, you can discuss all this with them too.
Is there any other information you'd like for me to provide in the next meeting?
No, I think we're good at this time.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Next item up is Seaglass Village, land use text and zoning district boundary change application.
Before you start this, I would like to disclose that I was the project manager on this site.
Okay.
I have no fiduciary gain in this, so.
How many years
You're
ago
not
was that?
involved in
I'm not involved in it any way at all, and it's been since 2013.
Okay, thank you. So I don't see any reason why you would have to reclude yourself.
It's probably buried into something.
Oh, here it is, yeah. Did I give you yours back?
I got mine back.
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, lady and gentlemen of the
Can
board.
you introduce yourself first?
Yes, thank you for having me. My name is Michael Skolnick.
Okay, Mike, you can sit at the table, you don't have to stand up.
If you want me to.
We'd love to have you at the table. Thanks, Mike.
No problem. My name is Michael Skolnick. I'm a land use attorney with Archipelago. Here tonight on behalf of Seaglass Village Condominium Association. The purpose of this amendment is to actually increase the lot coverage allowance for the site for drip edges and driveways within the condominium complex. I'm here tonight specifically as the second step to initiating a zoning amendment to either two options, change the current rural district designation to a residential A zoning, or also the possibility of considering an entirely new zone. That new zone would be a new residential zoning district with an increased lot coverage allowance and allowing seasonal cottages as a permitted use. Recognizing the fluidity of development in the town and ever-changing needs of the property owners, in 2013, the select board, this board, and the town people actually voted to implement a four-step process for reviewing and revising zoning ordinances and applying for amendments. That four-step process, as you may know, it starts with the select board, and they pretty much review the application for completeness, and then we go in front of the planning board to review the merits of the application and have a recommendation back to the select board, who decides to put it on the town ballot or not for town vote. This is the second step, and we're here with the board today to answer any questions you may have about the application. I'm specifically requesting that this board make a positive recommendation to the select board to include the zoning amendment on the next town warrant for its citizens to vote on whether the proposed zoning amendment is acceptable. And we would like the citizens to have an opportunity to vote on that. Before I go to the 6 criteria that we have to talk about tonight, I do want to just address some of the concerns and provide a very brief background of Seaglass Village. Seaglass Village initially went before this board in 2007 and was approved as a seasonal cottage complex. Seasonal cottages since then and back in 2013 are no longer a permitted use anywhere in town, so it's a legally non-conforming use as it stands right now. Just to address some of the concerns in the planner's memo, and just some of the major concerns, I understand that you may have questions as well, but I do wanna address the fact of lot coverage requirements and what they're initially implemented for. Typically, lot coverage requirements are meant to address stormwater concerns. When an application goes before this board, they have to go through a very thorough stormwater review, with plans from an engineer, stormwater implementation, and review process by both this board and DEP. The applicant must demonstrate that to the planning board that stormwater is retained and treated on site. They went through that process and this board did approve this development. There was also concerns in the planner's memo about aesthetics, and lot coverage isn't only for stormwater, but it's all.
Can I interrupt you 1 second?
Absolutely.
Mike? The original plan was approved. If your change was to go through, it would be additional lot coverage that could be added, which would require a different study on, just so we're clear that that plan, just because it was approved, doesn't mean that there's additional lot coverage that can just go without anything else happening. Okay.
Absolutely,
okay.
any plan that would come from this amendment would have to come before this board and go through the strict scrutiny of this board and meet the town's ordinances. The
Sorry to
general,
interrupt your train of
no,
thought
no
there.
problem,
Just the way you were talking was like you thought that it would be a done deal, so.
the general vicinity I wanna look at as a whole in this area. I did just pass out a blow up of this general area and it's taken from the town's GIS, and I labeled a few properties that have some rather intense density just north of this property and are also within the rural district. This area between I-95 and Route 1, I think we can look at this map and we can drive down Route 1 and we can realize that it is not rural in nature. This ordinance specifically has a purpose for rural, and I just wanna read it to you. It says, "The purpose of the rural district is to maintain open rural character of the land within the district. Open uses of the land such as forestry and agriculture uses should be encouraged and large-scale residential uses discouraged." And then it goes on further. This area between Route 1 and 95, it does not feature these characteristics. There is little to no forested area. There is certainly no agricultural area in this time. There's numerous high-density residential or commercial developments better suited for the RA district here. Any proposed increase in lot coverage that comes from this application, and that's not what we're considering here tonight, but if it comes back before this board, if there is an allowed increased lot coverage in the zone, and we come back before this board, it's not gonna affect open space whatsoever. It's going to be for drip edges around the houses, and it's gonna be for driveways within the infrastructure that doesn't take up any of the open space in the development.
It doesn't prohibit it if we increased it to what you're requesting, I think it goes to 40% lot coverage, is that correct?
RA zone is 40%, rural zone is 20%.
20%, right, so you have the same issue with every other site that's been developed along these same guidelines, that they would have the right to come in, and those could request the same type of change in zoning change, right?
Many, we have several RV parks and cottage complexes that were designed and approved and built right at that 20% threshold.
Right, okay, go ahead.
And personally, and looking at this broader area, it doesn't seem like we're the only site that would benefit from this RA district change. I certainly think every site that I labeled on that plan going up into the larger forested area would also benefit, especially if they're designed right up to that 20% requirement. They're probably running into similar issues that Seaglass Village is running into right now.
That's how they were designed though. They were designed to stay at that 20%.
Absolutely, and we also believe that's why the town implemented a way to amend the zoning.
No.
If-
We're not gonna get into that. These projects were built as cottage communities, not residences. Okay, you have Beach Dreams, Summer Village, and Seaglass. They are not residences, and if they are residences, then they should have gone through subdivision. And there was a battle taken on in the very beginning when the very first one was built, which was Summer Village, that said these are not residential dwellings or residences. They are a business. They must have a license, and they must be available to the traveling public when not in use. So, I mean, you're asking us to take and put a business into the RA district, which I'm 100% against. And to turn around and make them a special zoning, you're now bringing them back in and saying that they are an approved use again, and they're not. They've been zoned out. The people of the town have said, no more cottages.
Well, the planner's memo did mimic what you just said, where these aren't residences, and we understand that interpretation. While we don't,
And your letter continuously says residences in them. They're not residences. If they were residences, then they're in violation of the subdivision ordinance because they never went through the town subdivision laws. They were fought to go, when these projects were going through, they were fought and said they are not residences, they never will be residences, and they're supposed to be available to the traveling public. So if they're not, then you're in violation of our zoning ordinances already.
respectfully, absolutely, that letter was submitted before Mike Livingston's interpretation and providing us that these are residences, so it wasn't in retaliation and disagreeing with them.
Okay. The other thing is you sent some pictures to us of the skirting rotting away. Well, all of those skirtings had wood chips around them originally, and they were about 4 to 6 inches below the grade so that they wouldn't rot away. And in that particular picture that you sent that said they're rotting away because this has to be taken care of, the skirting, the land was brought up right tight to the skirting, which also stops the water flow that's supposed to be going under those cottages. So, I mean, the zoning change that you're asking for is, it's a spot zoning. And once you start with yours, everybody else is gonna do the same thing, they're gonna wanna do it.
Respectfully, again, I do disagree with the interpretation that it's spot zoning. When you look at what the law court has said about what spot zoning in, if you're consistent with the comprehensive plan at all, then it wouldn't be spot zoning, as
But that-
well as,
That's not consistent with the comprehensive plan.
I think we can address that as I go forward.
Comprehensive plan is for residences. These are not residences. They're a commercial entity. You can say that they're residences, but they're not, and if they are residences, then you consider them a dwelling. They're in violation of the state subdivision law because they never went through subdivision. And they were fought never to go through subdivision.
When you say spot zoning, the change to RA would not be spot zoning specifically because it's already there.
Yeah,
If
but
you're just moving it up one
But
district.
you're putting a use into it that's not supposed to be in it. In other words, the RA district, these aren't residences, they're a commercial building. So you wanna put a commercial project into a residential zoning district.
These
And
can be rented out weekly, daily, whatever, right?
the,
I mean, that's how they were built.
They were built that way, and everybody that bought them all knew how they were built and how they were zoned. They also knew from day one, and Larry can tell you this, there's always been an issue of lot coverage. And that was very carefully followed through to make sure that the lot coverage issue didn't go over the 20%. 19.24, something like that there. I mean, it was very, very careful that it was done.
I understand what happened back in 2007 and what the development was. I do understand it was a maximum build-out approach to what they were doing.
Mhm.
I just addressing the spot zoning issue.
I mean, if you really, to be honest, if you really want more lot coverage, there's a piece of property up there, 18-3B, which is landlocked, which is about 12 acres, go buy it. Put it into the,
Tried that already, Dave.
you gotta offer more money.
What I would say, and if I could continue with this, just addressing what was in the planner's memo as lodging facilities, do believe that is further away from consistent than a residential dwelling would be for a rural zone.
Well, you got a density bonus because they're lodging facilities. If these particular units were what you're saying residences, you'd have to cut that project by 1/2.
Is that really what you wanna do is?
Yeah, I mean, you're
cut
talking
out
4 to
half
1.
of those? I don't think that's what you wanna do.
No. And I am not specifically saying these are residences, I promise you that I'm
We
not.
argued that point, when I read through your whole memo, you even questioned Mike on using the word that it wasn't residential. I read your memo fully, I understand it, I believe, and you argued against that, saying there's no, I believe you said there was no ordinance language regarding
No definition
residential,
of
no
residence.
definition of it in our, isn't that what you said?
Yes,
Right, so.
that's
so-
what, first off, I'm not Attorney Richard, I'm
Okay,
Attorney
whatever,
Stone.
I'm just, but
But
you're
I-
representing
yeah, I
the
do,
fact, so.
absolutely.
Okay, so these were approved based on a certain set of criteria. Now you wanna come back and change the criteria and double the lot coverage in that area. That's the bottom line, is the way I see this. Does anybody see it any differently?
Yeah, and the rural district says 20% lot coverage. And that's what you're at. So we don't really wanna move it out of the rural district and make it into an RA district, which gives you another 20% lot coverage.
Absolutely, I am not denying that the rural district allows 20%, that's exactly why we're here. There is a process in the town's ordinance to change zoning and to review zoning changes. We shouldn't consider the 20%, if we're asking for it to get out of rural, we should be reviewing whether 40% is suitable for this area.
So what you're saying is you wanna have your own kind of zoning?
No, we want to.
That's where we started at the beginning of it, so.
So
I
you
was
wanna
gonna say that's fine,
There,
but now if we go, instead of being 20 and go down to 10, you're kinda in the same boat as where you are.
sorry?
If the ordinance changes.
If the ordinance changes to, say we call this a cottage district now,
Mhm.
we can also say that the coverage needs to be only 10%. Or actually higher, I'm sorry, wrong math, 30% or 40%. No, wrong math again.
Mike, if we
You're done.
turn around and we move this forward and they move this into a separate district or into the RA district, does that allow them to increase their lot coverage because they're a non-conforming use?
That's an item I brought up in my memo with concerns on that. I think if they were just taking the parking spaces that are grass now and making them gravel, that's not an expansion of the non-conforming use because it's parking, whether it's grass or gravel or pavement, it's parking, so that's not an expansion of use. They did mention also some on-site patios.
That's an expansion
It's
of
an
use.
expansion of
That
use.
would be an expansion of use. So that item was, troublesome as far as if it's still a non-conforming use, then how can you expand it in any way? Whether it's a structure that needs a building permit or whether it's even an expansion of land area, where you're taking an area that's currently vegetated, making it into an outdoor patio where it wasn't used for cottage use before. I had that concern that I tried to express in my memo. And I think the response that came from the applicant was that in the second zoning change potential for changing it and creating a separate zone just for that property, the goal would be to make it a conforming use.
That's still spot zoning.
And that's
It's
spot
changing
zoning
it
at
for
that
one
point.
property.
Yeah, that was, I tried to bring in my memo, I think that just expanding the RA zone, there's an argument that that's not spot zoning. But the other alternative zoning change to create a whole separate zone for that one property, I think that does specifically meet spot zoning.
We would argue that it wouldn't, and I'll tell you why. We argue that it wouldn't because it's a zone that's being implemented by the town, and any other zone, any other property in this town can go and apply for that exact same zone that is now included in the ordinance, so it's not specific to this property.
But again, in 2013, we zoned out cottages, why do we wanna put a new zone in for cottages?
Yeah.
I mean, you're asking.
And what I'm asking is for allowing the townspeople to consider it at a town vote. I'm just asking this board, don't make the decision for everybody else in
You do
town.
realize the town just had a vote on density projects, right? And overwhelmingly it passed that
We-
they not be allowed
We've increased the
anymore.
density on everything,
So,
And
Decreased.
decreased.
decreased the density on
Right.
everything.
we are not looking to increase the density at all. One thing I will say,
It
if I
would
can,
change if they all of a sudden have allowed 40% lot coverage.
Right.
So you can't say that that wouldn't happen, because you can see the applications coming in. I wanna add a room on instead of a patio, I wanna do this, I wanna do that. And then you have all the other same type situations coming at us with all that too. There was a reason that this was set up originally this way, it didn't go through the approval process that it would have to go to, as Dave pointed out, if it was a subdivision, so I get what you're trying to tell us, I've read the whole menu and you can continue, but you just you need to understand, I think I speak for the board when I tell you, the feeling on the board is that we're gonna make a recommendation to the select board not to approve this and not to send it to the voters.
I appreciate your position on it and relaying it. I do wanna address one or two things the board said. And Mike very clearly laid out what is non-conforming about this. And I agree with him that adding driveways wouldn't be non-conforming. The specific language of non-conformance that he pointed out in the memo, it speaks to buildings and structures, expanding those uses. That does-
Lot coverage is an absolute non-conforming item, so.
Absolutely, but it's not the non-conforming use here. The non-conforming use is seasonal cottages. Those seasonal cottages cannot be expanded. We understand that. However, the ordinance does not prohibit parking areas, driveways, sidewalks, these sorts of things.
Amenities,
Sorry, absolutely.
so they could expand their amenities at the same time.
They can't expand anything of their patios, because that is, like you said, might be part of the home itself. However, the driveway, the ordinance specifically doesn't prohibit driveways anywhere. Actually, section 201-41 requires sidewalks at least for all new buildings and single-family dwellings that aren't single-family dwellings or duplexes.
3 times
This-
single-family dwelling.
I know that
It's also-
aren't.
But you're using language
It's also
that
not a
applies
road.
to something else.
No, I said that are not, other than single-family dwellings or duplexes, meaning that's where we fall. I'm not considering single-family dwellings or duplexes. It also, if you look at the site plan review ordinance, as well as the subdivision ordinance that we are not subject to, cause we're not residences. But even if we were, they require sidewalks and parking areas,
However,
off-street parking areas.
but however, that's not a road, that's a driveway. That's a driveway from the beginning of the property all the way up through the end and all the external loops, it is not a road.
Cause it doesn't meet the specifications for a road.
Oh, it does, but it's not a road.
It's not a road.
It's not a road, it's a driveway through the project, it's not a road.
A private road?
No, it's not a road,
It's not a road.
it was never a road, I mean, it just, that's why they didn't have to put sidewalks and stuff in, although there is a walking side going up on the right-hand side all the way up through. So, I mean, you're trying to make this into something that it's not a residential dwelling unit, it's not a residential project where people live, it's a hotel, I mean, yes, it is, it's hotels and cottages. That's all it is.
And I'm not trying to make this
Okay,
into a
so
residential development.
right now, Summer Village
Seaglass.
Seaglass cannot be built again. The hotels could never be built the way they are now, because now you have to have 20 units in a building, and the cottages have been zoned completely out. And you're asking us to make a district, another zoning area, that would allow these things, because if we made a zoning area that the cottages would be a separate zoning, that all these things all of a sudden are back into play.
I'm providing that option. I'm also giving the option of expanding the RA district, which there is currently a non-conforming use. It will still be a non-conforming use, so I am not generating an additional non-conforming use here due to this expansion of the RA
The
district.
town recognizes the fact that as we make ordinance changes, some of the current locations become non-conforming because of the ordinance changes. So that's not really an argument to say that we need to do this because it's non-conforming, just so you know, because that happens all the time.
And to increase the lot coverage up to double of what it is now is just, I mean, it is the rural district, it was designed in the rural district, it abuts properties that are in the rural district. And the only RA section of this area happens to be to the south of it.
And obviously the town didn't want any more of these developments because of the fact that they changed the ordinance to prevent this from happening, right? Isn't that what happened?
Yeah, 2013, there was a lodging committee formed, and it went before, after several months of working on revisions to the lodging ordinance, it went to the voters, and the voters voted to eliminate seasonal cottages as an allowed use and set a lot of new performance standards to hotel.
Right.
Unanimously, I mean, it was overwhelming, the vote.
And this would still be a legally non-conforming use, even if you change the district from rural to RA. I think one more thing we can address that before you make a decision is the one.
Hold on a second, I just want you to make sure you understand. We can't make a decision, we still have to have a public hearing, correct?
Exactly, yeah.
Right, so we're not making a decision tonight. I was just giving you the feeling of the board so you understood where you stood.
I appreciate that, and
So there
hopefully
will
we
be,
can address some of these concerns.
we will continue this and have a public hearing at our next meeting, hopefully, right?
Sure, yes.
So, just so you know, so
Thank you.
you're gonna have to be back here again to explain it to the public.
I look forward to it.
Okay.
One more thing I would address, there is the concern about the 20% allowance and then 5% allowances for pedestrian circulation facilities. I read that transitional area from the comprehensive plan that was 2005, if I'm not mistaken. I think we can all agree that this area has drastically changed since 2005. However, you read it and it's to improve access in this area is a priority as well, with a particular need to encourage road connections among new and existing residential developments.
It's not a residential development.
As you pointed out, this is not a residential.
Not a road either.
And it's not a road,
You
and on top of that, okay, it's a site plan for a business.
since it's not a residential development and it is not a road, therefore that does not apply. The 20%, if you read that provision, that does not apply, it applies to residential developments.
You're beating a dead horse with us, right? So what I would recommend is that you just allow us to continue it and then you come back at the next meeting, explain it to the public. And then we will have a discussion after the public hearing, okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. Can I get a motion to have a public hearing, please?
So I make a motion that we have a public hearing on our next available meeting.
Second.
All those in favor? That's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. Have a good night. Okay, next order of business is land use ordinance changes, ordinance change proposals. I'm gonna take a quick break. You guys can start on the first one.
Mike?
Mike, you wanna lead off?
First one on the packet was to consider street and sidewalk standards in chapter 201. At a joint meeting we had with police and fire and public works, it was discussed, this got started with discussing what to require for turnarounds in the ordinance. Because our current ordinance requires cul-de-sacs to be constructed in pretty much all subdivision situations unless the public works department and fire department agree to an alternate design. And over the years, we've had multiple alternate designs come in. We've had, different fire chiefs who have different thoughts on what turnarounds are adequate or not. Our equipment has changed over the years as well. So it was a too general ordinance to just say that we could consider alternate turnarounds. So after our workshop with the current fire and police departments and public works. I revised the ordinance to, I think, reflect what was discussed. And it's broken down, and this proposed ordinance goes beyond that too and creates a whole approval process for a private street. For one that wouldn't, that's not part of a subdivision, but part of like a family division that doesn't come to the planning board. I referenced that at one of our workshops, but don't know if the board wants to go in that direction or not, or just leave it the way it is now, when there's no approval process for it, but.
I gotta be honest, Mike, I think that if you're doing a family subdivision, adding on the additional cost of the road design and all that stuff isn't fair to the people. I mean, we don't wanna be putting a burden on somebody that's just going in, splitting off a lot for their family. I mean, if you're not gonna go through subdivision, I don't think we need to be going after, design standards for roads. I mean, if they're gonna subdivide it and they built the road and they split one and later on they gotta split the third one, now they're in subdivision, now you relook at the road at that time. So,
And they still have to, even for a private road that doesn't go through planning board, they still have to meet the standards of 201. But the approval process I laid out in the ordinance, it would be a significant expense.
It's an expense that costs, and we wanna be able to let the families have a small subdivision on their own. I mean, it just, I can't see putting that expense on an individual person for one lot. I mean, when you go through it, I mean, you could add on, what, 30 grand easily? 20 or 30 grand in design work?
It costs more than the lot itself.
And that's the problem,
Not in today's market.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the problem with all these small lots, it would cost the people a lot of money and families should be able to, give a piece of property to their kids.
Yeah, currently the way they get, well, they don't get any official approval right now at all. It's only when someone comes in for a building permit on a lot they divided without needing to go through planning board process, then it gets looked at by the code office and issuing a building permit. And in that case, the code office requires a plan, requires a road cross-section to be put on the plan.
Yep.
So they can check the box off that it had engineering, but it doesn't really have the ability to require stormwater studies
Yeah,
and putting together a plan that goes through an approval process and an application fee. They don't have to do any of that right now, which if you wanna keep it the way it is now, we can eliminate a few pages of
Yeah,
ordinance.
I don't wanna kill the small individual one lot subdivision that an owner's doing. That's just crazy. I mean, it's expensive enough in the town.
I just say the only thing is we wanna have the road paved. The reason for that is access of emergency vehicles.
We still, at the last joint meeting we had, we still had some small roads being able to be gravel.
There's no reason that you have to pave every single road. I mean, the emergency, they gotta be able to get an emergency vehicle in first of all if they're gonna get a building permit. Paving a road, it's just like a driveway, it's not a full road.
Well, they have to, even for one lot, they have to make it 20-foot gravel.
Yeah, no, I
And then
understand
if
that.
it's more than 4 lots, it has to be 26-foot gravel and.
One lot, 20-foot gravel, gonna cost you, we'll say 30 grand to build it, okay? That 30 grand's gonna jump to 60 or 70 by the time you pave it. That's a lot of money for an individual lot in a family split. I can understand if that's somebody splitting it out to sell it, that I wanna see it paved. But for a family split, which is most of
We
these.
can't make that distinction.
I know that. I
A lot of
understand
lot
that.
divisions
I'd stay
occur
away from the
specifically
pavement.
just to sell.
I'd stay away from the pavement on it.
I still think you're better off paving it because they never get maintained. How many times you see, well, Green Road's a great example, everybody drives around the big potholes.
And I think the fire department would agree with that, because over the years, 20 years goes by and the gravel does degrade and you get to the question of, how do you make them upgrade it and.
The biggest thing is the thaw in the springtime. I mean, you can put all the gravel in there you want, but you get that thaw in the springtime and that road is not gonna be passable for, could be a few days, could be a week or two.
So we could look at lesser paving standards for the smaller roads.
Yeah.
Keep it at the 20-foot gravel base, but for up to 4 lots, pave 16-foot wide
Yeah,
or
something.
12.
What's 16 foot wide gonna cost you in paving though? I mean,
Still- still
it's a
expensive.
lot of money when you're talking a single lot split, you know, I just can't see.
I, again, like with Dave, I would stay away from the paving just based off cost. If you wanna, if you're putting in a road for yourself, you're gonna wanna maintain it yourself. So if you have to hire it
Well-
out for someone to come in after the thaw,
I
you
guess
are, or you have your own equipment to do it.
I guess I'm just looking at, Dave's talking about a family split. Well, okay, what happens eventually? Eventually a family dies off and someone else buys it and.
The people still have to maintain their own road, I mean, that's, if they wanna destroy
Yeah.
their car, they can destroy their car.
And so the problem is right now, building is so expensive. And we're gonna be talking about affordable housing as well. I mean, this is just a nail in the coffin for somebody that's trying to build a house for themselves and they gotta spend another 30 grand on the driveway. Basically is the way I see it.
Ambulances and fire trucks are expensive too, if they're going down those roads, right? I mean, to Sue's point, if
I
the
get it.
medical services can't get up and
They're
down.
not going up and down it every day,
Only going up in an emergency.
I mean, it would be different if they, if
Is there a
was
distinction between the length that,
Yeah, the way
before you
it's,
start to enforce something like that?
the way
After a
it's,
certain distance, it has to be paved?
yeah, the way it's written now, and it would be for subdivisions or private streets, but it has a different gravel width requirement, a different paving width requirement, and a different turnaround requirement based on how many lots or dwelling units are gonna use it.
I was saying, is there a length of the drive that triggers?
One of the criteria is based on it being less than 1,000 feet in length. That is,
Yeah, but you're not, nobody's building a road 1,000 feet long. They're gonna build in a, you know, a road to give you the frontage, and then they're gonna turn around and turn the rest of it into a driveway, which we have no standards for driveways.
unless to get to the buildable lot, to create the lot, it has to go. We've had private streets longer than 1,000 feet that only serve 2 dwellings or lots, and the code for just 2 dwellings is 20-foot gravel, but because it's more than 1,000 feet long, they had to build it 26.
Yeah, that's fine,
Because of that.
but I just don't see paving that whole entire length,
Yeah, which would be, very expensive.
a lot of money.
Yeah, I can tell you, I just built the road in North Berwick for doing a lot division. And it wasn't more than 400 feet long, and it was $44,000.
$44,000 for 2 lots. That's $22,000 a lot just to get into the property.
You could certainly add language in there that says the gravel road must be maintained to a suitable standard.
One of the language changes was to include that language, cause it was a little absent before, was that it has to be maintained to town
So,
standards.
I mean, that would solve the problem as far as whether the fire engines would have problems going down as long as it's being maintained.
And we would, mean the town, if it gets out of repair, the fire department or police department or ambulance services would report it to the code office. And the code office would have to contact the owners and say, you have to fix your road.
I mean, that's a fair compromise.
And that's, part of the idea of having an approval process for that would be that would say you have to establish a road maintenance association. We have no trigger for that right now.
Okay.
But it, like you
So
mentioned, it
you can
is,
reword this to get this to that. I mean, if everybody else is in agreement, Dave,
Yeah, I just don't, like I said, I just don't wanna force somebody to pay it.
we don't want to put people out the opportunity to have a house.
so eliminate the approval process.
Yeah, that's all expensive,
Yeah, I think
that's
it has-
paperwork they're never gonna use.
I mean, to get a building permit, they have
Good
to,
paperwork in engineering, they'll use it.
Half the people don't read the plans.
just add that, add the language about maintaining to the town standards.
And I think the criteria for the turnarounds are all just what we discussed at our last workshop.
Yeah.
Um,
Those are legit.
Right, the solid cul-de-sac versus the full cul-de-sac versus a hammerhead.
Right.
And we still wanted to allow a hammerhead for very small.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you put dimensions in now,
Two?
so.
Two lots for a hammerhead or 3?
It was if you could do 2 lots on a street with no turnaround.
Right.
If it's only 150 feet long.
Okay.
Or less than 150 feet long. If it was serving 4 lots, it's 20-foot gravel with a hammerhead.
Yep.
If it's more than 4 lots but less than 8, then they could do the solid cul-de-sac option. And then anything more than that, they have to do the full cul-de-sac option with the island in the middle.
Yeah, but if you get to a 4-lot subdivision, that's coming in front of us anyways.
Not necessarily, because you could have an existing private street that a couple of lots use right now, and then the lot at the end of it wants to split.
Yeah, but if it hadn't been split in previous 5 years.
If it was a fresh lot, anything more than 2 lots, you're gonna see anyway as a subdivision.
Yep.
But it's the total number of lots that use that road. So we have many situations with a private street that, 2 or 3 lots already use, and then the lot at the end wants to divide. And then he has to put in the turnaround and upgrade the road all the way to wherever it ties into a town road.
Yep.
Um,
But that's no longer a family split.
Well, the lot at the end may be a whole different family. It
Yeah.
could be different ownership that's never split before at all.
Yeah, but now but the issue is you have one road going in, and that's part of the use on that road, so it's a 4-lot, a 3-lot or 4-lot road already,
Yes,
so.
What's the next one, sidewalks?
the next one is in the same section of the ordinance for sidewalks, and we discussed expanding the sidewalk requirement from beyond what the current sidewalk, what we call overlay district, is Sanford Road all the way from the train station to Route 1. And then along Route 1 from the library all the way to Drake's Island Road is the current sidewalk overlay district. We just had the Route 1 corridor study done, and it's talking about sidewalks the entire length of Route 1. So the language changes here were really just to incorporate that Route 1 corridor study. There was a section that we never used in the ordinance before that was reserved, so added some language for bike lanes.
Yeah, I'd be careful with that. One of the problems with bike lanes, keep in mind that the state laws, you have to have 3 feet on the
Right.
side of when you pass. So you have to make the bike lane wide enough so that people, without encroaching on the lane.
But at the same time, your problem with that is if you make them wider, you have people riding abreast.
Right.
So now you're still gonna have that 3 feet to get away from them.
I think you meant the word narrow.
Well, what you need to do is widen the travel lane sufficiently so you have 3 feet.
Right, but you said.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah, because that's the big issue I keep seeing is people riding abreast rather than riding behind each other. I mean, even on Atlantic Avenue. They ride down the middle of Atlantic Avenue and, you can't pass them or get by them or anything else, and they just, that's how they get hit.
Yeah, I think the corridor study calls for 5-foot wide bike lanes all the way up, so we meet that 3-foot.
Well, if someone said.
Well, no,
Right,
it doesn't,
3 feet
it
over.
doesn't.
You have to have 3 feet separating you and the bike.
So if the bike's
so you have
riding
a
down the
That's what the
center,
state law says, so if they're riding right in the edge of the bike lane,
You
you
have to
still need
move
3
out 3
feet.
feet.
Oh, so if they're riding in the middle, they need 6 feet, 3 feet to either side?
so basically what we're saying is we need the travel lane to be wide enough so that when people go to pass someone who's in the bike lane, they can give them the 3 feet.
Oh, for passing.
Right, depending on the design though, they also set them up where your bike lane's like 2 feet, then there's a 3-foot buffer, then you have your solid white, then you have your travel lane.
But the problem, the people that ride in that 3-foot buffer.
Yeah.
You still have to give them the 3 feet.
So basically have to be single file.
Yeah, so you have to give them a smaller single file lane and a bigger travel lane for the cars.
Yeah, cause the corridor study calls out travel lane widths, and bike lane width, and sidewalk width. And it all just barely fits in the areas where we still have just a 66-foot wide right of way.
Does it do away with the center turn lane?
No, but they make the other lanes a little narrower.
Like the bridge where
I would-
where the oversized
Yeah.
roads came from.
I would stay away from the bike lanes, from someone that drives in the city a lot with bike lanes. Yes, I get people wanna ride their bicycles, I would find another place to put them.
Yeah, but if you give people another mode of transportation, there'll be less people in cars clogging up all the roads.
There's still
It's
people.
really hard to be on a bike.
Right, and there's still people, and I'm one of them, that will be driving everywhere and not riding a bike. My heart can't take it.
You still need something in for bike lanes.
Yeah, regardless of the design standard,
People are riding their bikes on Route 1 already, so it's not gonna.
Yeah, and I think just adding the very, it refers to the corridor study, but didn't give any specifics for width.
Right.
And
How about enforcing the rules for the bicyclists
Yes.
also?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Start giving them tickets when they're out there riding in the wrong direction on the sidewalks and everything.
And blowing through stop signs, yeah.
What, you like the 3 cars that go through the red light?
And we did, we were currently in the overlay district, there's several thresholds that trigger the need to build a sidewalk in front of your property. And the language of the existing ordinance was a little confusing, so we broke it up into paragraph form. But the thresholds are still the same. So if you're building a commercial facility on a vacant piece of land, you have to construct a sidewalk in front. If you're renovating an existing commercial or putting an addition on it of a certain size, you have to physically install a sidewalk in front of your property. There is an alternate to provide funds towards a sidewalk development fund, basically. And that fund can be used to pay for like a bigger town project to put in sidewalks, which may be the direction Route 1 is going. But it's an option that, the way we wrote it, the planning board would have to approve putting money into the fund versus building it in front of the property.
The only problem with that is trying to figure out what's a fair amount. You have to base it on the current rates, and then when you
Yeah.
finally did the sidewalk, we'd be short money, but.
Yeah, cause we can have, their engineer or even have them have a contractor give us a price per linear foot of sidewalk. And then they give us the equivalent, but then if the sidewalk project doesn't happen for 3 years, obviously that price is gonna be higher.
Right.
So that's the downside of that.
Like, what about going back and looking at all the site plans that had comments in them that said, if sidewalks are put on the road, that the development will put their sidewalks. There's quite a few of them from what I understand.
I haven't stumbled across too many. Interesting though, with the Starbucks that was here tonight, if you look back on the site plan approvals for that property, back in, I think it was 1996, there was a fast food restaurant approved for where the car wash and the Starbucks would be. It was one lot, one area.
Yep.
And at that time, the town required a sidewalk. It never got built, so the sidewalk never got built. But even back in the 90s, we were gonna require a sidewalk.
There's an awful lot of them out there that say that they're supposed to be sidewalks. I mean, if they split that piece of property out, maybe that sidewalk should be put there.
And I think that's gonna be a recommendation from DOT as part of their movement permit, is gonna be pedestrian improvements. And certainly, the other thing they're gonna be looking for in that application is an approval from the planning board to reduce their parking requirement for the plaza, not for Starbucks, but for the plaza. Because when you take those parking spaces away, they won't meet our current requirements. And of course, to give that reduction in parking,
We can ask
we
for
look at
sidewalk.
public transportation, how close it is, sidewalks. So under that provision, they may, the board can require them to put in a sidewalk.
On the side,
And there's a crosswalk right, 120 feet away in front of the car wash, so there should be one to connect to this crosswalk.
on the sidewalk, did you put anything in there, or is this place put it for snow removal during the winter time? Be on the property owner, not the town?
No,
Did you think of anything like, is that a place we
Yeah,
would
that's
put it?
something that we wanted to see.
yeah, I think you mentioned that at the last meeting.
Yep.
Yeah, it might depend if it's in the public way or on their property. Cause in downtown situations, that's very common. We don't have really a downtown, but our idea is to grow certain areas into a downtown. Yeah, we do have provisions in the ordinance now, which I think are good and should stay, is that, some areas of Route 1 are gonna be very tight, where the only place to put a sidewalk will be on the private property. But if that's required, they can grant an easement to the town, so that we can maybe maintain it instead of them, which would be questionable, I guess, but but it doesn't impact their lot coverage. So we currently have an exemption in the ordinance that if you're putting a sidewalk on your property, that doesn't, you can not count that towards lot coverage.
That's okay, I don't have
Yeah,
a
which I
problem.
think is a
Yeah.
good provision.
No, I think that's great.
I'm
I
more
mean,
worried about during the winter time.
Yes, yep. And associated costs with that too. You know, if the federal project goes through, and the federal funding, I should say, to do the sidewalk project all up and down Route 1 that the corridor study talks about, I believe if there's federal funding involved with constructing the sidewalks, then the town will have to maintain them all. But that's,
Something to look at for the future. I'm
And
assuming,
what are they proposing? Federal funds usually propose tar, don't they?
oh yes, yeah,
Asphalt?
it would be anything beyond that would, you know, be at, you know, of municipality expense. That's how it happened on Sanford Road here. For the pavers we have currently, it was a DOT project to upgrade Sanford Road. And we wanted to upgrade it to pavers, and the town paid the difference in cost between paved sidewalks and pavers.
Yeah, they didn't
And
put
we
them in
did that on
right.
Route 1 as
Yeah.
well.
They didn't put them in right though.
Yeah, they have
Next-
a different spec for it now.
Next time we let them put the tar down first, then we hire somebody to go over the top of them with pavers, all concrete.
And I didn't include it in this package because I was just really working on the text. But we talked about changing some of the specs. We have in the last package for the workshop that we had, I had included the construction details that are in the ordinance already, and there's a table saying where you have to put pavers and where you could put concrete or pavement even right now. And we'd wanna revisit that table and
I
do
thought-
different specs on
I
that.
thought we wanted to go to the stamp.
the stamped concrete, I
Yeah,
thought we were
I
going away
think-
from pavers.
Public
For
Works
maintenance.
was in favor of
Yeah. Stamp, yeah.
getting rid of the paver requirement entirely and requires stamped in a lot of locations or just concrete.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Public Works would prefer concrete versus pavement, but,
He liked the whole idea of the stamped concrete.
and currently granite curbing is required everywhere and we're gonna keep that the same, I
Oh,
assume.
yeah. Concrete lasts one season.
So yes, I did forget about the sidewalk maintenance by the property owners.
So what's the next, defaults and violations?
Yes, defaults and violations, so this was to add the stop work order language that the town attorney recommended. And we were talking for subdivision violations, but in looking at site plan section, we should have it in there. And so that's why it's now added in multiple locations, was,
So I
you
spoke,
just discussed subdivision, but I went ahead and added it to other
and I
sections.
spoke to you earlier today about the fact that, I thought, and I could be wrong, but I believe that part of our discussion was that the planning board should have the right to request a stop work order. Not rely on code just to do it, because of the fact that the plans come before us and we realize there's an issue and they're not addressing it. And we wanted the right to say, okay, a stop work order has to be issued, isn't that what we were talking about?
Well, you can make a recommendation to the code office still, they're the
They have
only
to
one.
do it,
Yeah,
but-
they'd have to do it, but it would be at your recommendation.
Well, we want the authority to do it.
Have it issued. So
Have
that
it
we,
issued, so the code
we would
can't say,
direct the
no, we're
code
not
to
gonna
do
do
it.
You have the authority, you could have the authority to decide what's in default. But you don't have you can't have the authority to issue it. The code office would still have.
wouldn't we have the authority
issue
to
it.
direct the code office to issue it? Could we do that? Can you check with Leah
I
and
can
talk
check.
to her with it?
I wanna say, no, you can't, but we'll check with the town attorney.
Yeah, let's check with Leah.
Just legal aspects of that and due process and that element of it, but we'll check with the town
When you're
attorney.
saying a stop work order may be issued on the property, okay?
It should be
My
say
question
shall.
my question is, can you issue it for something that's non-permitted? I mean, right now, that they can't, the blasting, they couldn't stop the blasting, that's what we wanted to do, stop the blasting on that other project.
Correct.
So this can go up there and say, that's it, all work stopped on this project,
That's what we want.
That's the whole purpose in the subdivision section where we started the conversation,
okay?
was that currently the code office can only put a stop work order on a building permit, something they have the authority to do it under. But we wanted it to include things that are requirements of a subdivision approval not necessarily building permit.
We wanted that if they're in default, it can be issued on the entire project, not, they can't conduct any other type of work. And if they're involved with other projects, it should apply to those as well, so it stops anything that they're working on. So that they have to address the default right away.
Yes.
Yeah, we can't, if one developer had 3 projects going on in town, we could do a default on one, put a stop work order on one. We can't put stop work orders on the other ones,
Why not?
because they're not in default.
But he's in
But
default.
he's in default.
You
So-
can't, that, I can say, we can't do that.
You need to
That's
ask,
not,
have you asked Leah if we could do it?
no, I
You
will,
need to ask her.
I will, but I can tell you right now, that's not gonna be legal.
I mean, if he's in default in the town on something, he shouldn't be able to continue on with other
You
projects.
can't do that with building permits either. That question has been asked to the town attorney, is if someone's in violation of their building permit, can you put stop work orders on all their building permits in town? No, you cannot legally do that. So I'm taking a leap and saying we can't do that for subdivisions
Well, we
either.
can try.
But we can ask, we'll ask.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Speaking of that, why we're.
Kid's looking at us like
that
we're
stop
crazy.
work Have we looked into the project up there to see if that fire pond is holding water?
I got an email from the attorney last week, actually, I got a photograph from the week before, right around Christmas time. In the pond was like half full, or even more than half full. Got an email from him last Wednesday
On Burtmore Road.
saying the pond is now
That's fine.
full. So I asked for more photographs and I asked, you know, is the well working and are you gonna have the fire department test it? So,
And is it-
but the last report I got just from a few days ago was that the pond's full.
Is there a grade stake in there that shows the level of that pond?
No, we don't have a gauge in that one. That sort of predates our gauge requirement.
Well, just let them know if they're starting for their next project that they're gonna have to put them in all of them.
Yes, and I have already told them that.
So you may as well do it now.
Alright, so you have to ask Leah about our ability to direct them to do that. And then you haven't really got the short-term rentals done yet, right?
No, but I did wanna go over this bullet point of items of my thoughts on it and see if you had any other thoughts on it. You know, I was talking to the code office and we were talking about anything that's rented less than 90 days. In the other ordinances for other towns, it's a mix between 90 and 30. I don't know which one's more popular. What number of days do you guys think?
30.
30, yeah. I mean, that's more similar to our old hotel rules were no more than 28 days. So 30 is in
If they're
line with
renting for
that.
less than 30 days, they're considered a short-term rental.
Yeah.
Okay,
State statute is your month to month after a year-long lease, so.
Yeah, it ties in well with that too.
okay, so that's one of them. The other thing that we need to get into is what the building requires to make it a short-term rental,
Yes,
okay?
yes, what are
And
your thoughts on that?
egress windows,
Monitored fire alarm.
I should think we
Sprinkler
need
systems.
handicap access.
Monitored by.
Monitored fire alarm.
no,
Yes.
no, you can't make them do a monitored fire alarm in a single-family dwelling, no.
I
But
think
they need to
Yeah, they're
have,
renting it though.
They're renting it, I would say yes.
you don't have to put a
monitored?
monitored fire alarm system in in a duplex or a triplex until you get up to 4 units. So you can't do that, you're just trying to harass the owner. But you can turn around and make sure that they have carbon monoxide monitor and hardwired, that's key, hardwired smoke detectors. Alright, cause a lot of these older places all have battery operated stick-ups and they don't go in between each other.
What about handicap access?
It's you can't make a single family dwelling have to have handicap access, I don't think.
Yeah, it'd be tough.
You can't.
It would be hard, I'm just asking. I mean,
No,
it's
you
a
can't,
rental unit.
you can't do handicap, I mean, there are people out there that specialize in that and they get more rentals because of it, okay? I think you need to have a yearly inspection on them,
Yearly.
yearly, yes.
Yeah, cause we've tossed around that, whether it's yearly or bi-yearly, you know.
No,
every
should be a
other year.
yearly inspection
Time of
and
permit.
I know that this is something I am going to bring up, cause we need to get a health inspection officer and a lodging facility inspector that does nothing but lodging facility stuff and health and health inspections. Because we have a very bad reputation of hotels in this town for bed bugs and everything else.
Yeah, that
So-
exact topic has been discussed
And at
how
this,
these licensing fees may pay for that.
well, at this particular point, from the budget committee, we brought it up numerous times, I think we need to start to look at raising the licensing fees for not only hotels and everything else, but we need to also bring it up on campgrounds. I mean, campgrounds right now pay $1 per site up to $100 a year.
At $100.
Yeah, and they have as much impact on the town services as a hotel or
Oh,
a
easily.
cottage.
Yeah, easily.
You know, so I mean, that's something that, once we get going on the budget, I think that's gonna be pushed a little bit harder this year. Last year we asked for it, I think we need to really push it.
That's the second year in a row we asked for.
Yeah, well, now at this point, we need to meet with the selectmen, well, when we have our meeting with the selectmen, we'll discuss it.
What are your thoughts on what zones to allow them in? Because if it's gonna be a new use, which is the way I'm crafting the ordinance, was it's a independent separate use, it's not an ADU, it's not a lodging, it's a short-term rental, that will be the new use for that unit. Which means we can determine what zones, I guess, the way I worded in the memo, what zones not to allow it in. So I had listed, ones that think about rural, resource protection, transportation center, college district, cause they're already gonna have their own dorm rules for that. Light industrial, it doesn't seem like any of those districts short-term rentals maybe should be in. Rural's a big area of the town though, so that's a huge amount of area that we wouldn't allow them in. So that was the main one.
I don't have a problem letting them in the rural district, I really don't. However, what I think one of the biggest things is, we need to come up with a enforceable noise ordinance. Which we still don't have. I mean, it's so many minutes, it's so loud, so many decibels, it just can't be done,
We got rid of all that.
yeah.
Now it's very subjective, but
It's subjective, well, it needs to be something that the police department can pull up and say, yeah, this is noise. I mean, if somebody's in the house at 10 o'clock at night and I can hear your stereo next door, that's a negative impact in the area. And that's what everybody is concerned about with short-term rentals, is the impact on the abutters. I mean, they get crazy, and we have a letter from a lady here that said that their neighborhood has had problems.
And what
So
about a
rural-
penalty for not registering?
oh yes, for penalties, yeah, tracking these are gonna be a whole job on its own too. Almost where there are services that we can subscribe to, they're not cheap, but they'll search every website out there for short-term
Right,
rentals.
but what's the penalty for, so we're in the rural district, there's a house that does short-term rentals all the time. But they don't register with the town, what's the penalty?
There has to be a penalty.
Right.
Yes.
So that needs to be part of the language.
And that would be part of the licensing part of it, I think, is where that penalty, no, you're right, that would be, if we have a new use and they establish a new use without the proper approvals, no, that could be in the ordinance.
It needs to go in the licensing, because the ordinance part of it, all they wanna do is bring it back into compliance. The penalty needs to be in the licensing part of it.
Yeah, you have to give them
Because
time to
We don't
come
wanna,
back.
we don't wanna do that, we wanna put it out there point blank, you're in violation of the licensing for short-term rentals, and it's $1,000 fine or whatever it's gonna be, and it can't be cheap. You know, it's gotta be enough that people understand.
Yeah,
What?
it has to be right, so if they don't come back and get the license, it has to be so much a fine per day going forward.
I mean, if they don't get a license or get approval for that as a use at that location within a certain period of time, that's a stop work, cease and desist order can be posted on it for that.
Yeah, but again, now you're back into bringing them into compliance rather than, I mean,
And they
it's
still have
very
that-
difficult,
yeah.
it's very difficult, we got a lodging facility that, we find, have they paid that fine yet? You know, I mean, that's one of these things, you don't wanna do it, you wanna,
A fee per day and then eventually there's a municipal lien on the property.
yeah, under the lodging license, so under the licensing fee, not the site plan, because all the courts wanna do is bring them into compliance.
They're already in the rural districts, I don't know that you.
Yeah, see, that's the complication I was gonna bring up, if we didn't allow them in the rural zone, well, we're gonna have to deal with it anyways, we have to deal with the ones that are there already and grandfathered status.
Mike,
The purpose, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
The purpose is if it's less than 30 days, it's gonna fall under this new guideline that we're trying to write, short-term rental.
Correct.
Is there a minimum? Are we allowing under this license, if we're gonna call it a license, daily rentals? Or are we gonna say there's a
It would be-
minimum rental amount? You can't be renting it out by the day, it's not,
No, they rent Airbnbs by the day and we never
And that's
stop.
allowed
They
with
do,
the
right.
license, or are we
Yeah.
trying to restrict that, so
That's
it's
why
not,
it's less than 30 days.
Like Algonquin has a
we're not gonna
7-day
put a minimum on it?
Yeah, I was gonna say, some other towns do have a minimum. where
That's
they
what I'm
can't do
asking,
that.
yeah, where it's gotta be a
Yeah,
7 day
I'd like to
or,
see a 7-day minimum. You guys have a problem with
it's
that?
a lot of wear and tear on the neighborhood, a lot of,
That would dramatically change the landscape.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely,
tough
'cause there are a
on
lot
some of these
places-
really residential neighborhoods and there's strangers in the
Well, a
neighborhood
lot
all
of
the
them-
time, there's.
So here's a question, a lot of them might just rent for the weekend,
That's what I'm saying.
like, which is 3 days.
Down the beach, that's what they do, but all they're gonna do, I mean, if you put a 7-day minimum on it, all they're gonna say is, we're gonna rent it to you for the week for this much.
Right.
Right, and then they just.
Which is the
black out
3 days, and it's
Right.
gonna sit vacant the other days.
Right.
Cause most of the ones on the beach are in the areas that you get the 3-day rentals,
Right.
they're renting for a week anyways, cause they're not willing to lose that
I just,
time.
you just don't wanna have somebody different coming in every day, that's all.
7-day minimum then, yeah.
And we have to address the parking.
Yes, parking.
No grandfathered parking, they need to have 1 parking space per bedroom. Because there's a lot of them down there that don't have any parking, and they have 4 or 5 bedrooms in them that they're saying.
That's what the new ordinance is for dwellings right now.
Yep.
It's basically a space.
Or if there's an occupancy change, if they change
Mhm.
bedroom.
But we also have to make sure, Mike, when you do the grandfathering, cause well, they're gonna say that they're the use anyway, so why don't we do what was done in 1990? No, it was 2001, somewhere around there. They said that as of that day, there were no short-term rentals in the town, and that everybody had to go through, and that nothing was grandfathered.
Yeah,
This-
other towns have done that, and we did it once on something.
We did on the cottages.
I think it was conversion from housekeeping cottages to
Yep.
seasonal cottages.
Yeah, we come out and we said that that a seasonal cottage complex did not exist. And then gave away for the seasonal cottage complex to become there. So if we say as of the date of the affection, there is no such thing as an short-term rental. You're not grandfathered, which means you have to now meet these things to be that way, and the things have gotta be egress, safety, that's the whole issue, safety, safety, and safety.
That's the issue with current ADUs that are being used as short-term rentals,
Yep.
accessory dwelling units. And there are gonna be some cases though where those cannot meet whatever new standards we have. If we have a parking standard that we have as 1 space per bedroom, and there's currently a 2-bedroom ADU, those aren't too frequent, but most of them are 1 bedroom. And there's nowhere to put 2 parking spaces on the site, then we're taking away their ability to use it as a short-term rental,
Mm-hmm.
and they wouldn't be grandfathered. So I'm a little worried about taking there, but
You need to do that there, and the other thing that you were, I was just thinking about it,
or we could say that ends within a year, the date is when it gets adopted, and that gives them a year to file paperwork to figure out how they're gonna do it, if they
Yeah.
can at all.
well, my biggest concern is safety, okay? I mean, I every now and then I go on the VRBO and I look at the houses that are down by me, and I see units that people are showing, the inside of the unit, and they're in the basement, and they got a 2-foot by 2-foot window in the basement,
That's the biggest,
and they go out through a
biggest
bulkhead.
worries, yeah.
Right.
And they go out through a bulkhead, I mean, if there's ever a situation there, a fire or something, we're neglectful in the town allowing a business, because it's a business, short-time rentals is a business, and we need to call that out, so we can get it under the business license. Alright, short-term licenses are a business, and we have to make sure they're safe.
We have a lot of visitors that come here, and their expectation is that they're gonna have somewhere safe to stay.
That's right.
So you wanna do for every bedroom down there a single parking spot if they're a short-term rental. Is that, did I hear that correctly? And we're not gonna grandfather anyone that's down there right now for what parking they have available.
Ooh, now we're gonna have some situations.
I
Were you about to say it?
just wanna hear the answer before. Did I hear that correctly?
We could have a 6-bedroom home that gets rented on a weekly basis during the summer, and we're not gonna have 6 parking spaces on site.
Right, so we're talking about,
What are they doing with the cars?
What are they doing with the cars? I'll tell you what they're doing with them, they're parking them out on the street. Okay, and because there's so many doing it, the police department won't tag them. Because everybody's doing it down there.
so what happens with a 6-bedroom short-term rental that does not have 6 spots? Are you going to then tell that person that they cannot rent their property?
No, you're gonna tell them they can rent four bedrooms.
So what happens to the other 2 bedrooms that they have listed as their house? Or not as their house, but as rooms? Do they become
If
now,
it's a 6-bedroom, probably sleeps 20, so.
right, but now, right, let's not even move on how many cars that really is.
So what are we gonna do with all the cars that are down there?
We have a car problem, I agree with that statement, but again,
But we're making, we have the AD.
we're making it worse.
We're
But you're
going,
starting an ordinance change, so you have to find some way to at least address it.
I don't think not grandfathering the existing parking shouldn't be
I
grandfathered.
like Mike's idea of giving them a year to.
Yeah, but if they have a year to figure it out, if they don't have the
That
lot
may be
coverage,
to
where you
come
put your
into
parking?
compliance
Well,
with
then they
this.
talk to their neighbors and figure out how
I
they
think we're
do.
gonna, I think we're gonna have an issue with giving them a year, because I'm looking at a lot of these, and I'm just thinking as I'm driving up and down Atlantic and Ocean Avenue, of these places that have multiple units, don't have egress windows. And I'm thinking, right, the ordinance goes into effect. Number one, ordering windows, getting your permit, cause you're gonna need DEP permit, you're gonna need.
Some cases, yeah.
And I just don't see that happening within a year.
Yeah, I originally wrote up a little note for 24 months, actually.
Yeah, that's what I think we gotta do.
24 months to bring them into compliance.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're,
So
But
now,
there are-
now
Rather
let's,
than
But you're-
grandfathering anybody.
let's go,
Right.
let's
you're
go
still
back.
gonna have the same problem with the parking, like what you said about having monitored fire alarms. What you're doing is adding more cost to them for parking spots. I'm asking for something for safety, you're saying, I want more parking spots down the beach.
They are safety, number one, parking spots, not putting them in the road. Number two is these were never, houses down there were never designed to be Airbnbs and have 7 cars.
But some of them have been rented on a weekly basis for the sole summer for hundreds of years.
Yeah, which isn't a problem.
100 years, maybe.
Yeah, which isn't a problem, but they have the parking spaces usually.
Well, some of them do not though.
Well,
Like you said.
lately, the
parking
new
on
ones,
street,
the new ones don't have them.
or even the old
The ones that have been taking them and putting them into an existing family's house and putting them in the basement. Those are the ones that don't have the parking spaces.
And those are probably illegal units to begin with,
Mhm.
period. And those shouldn't be there and those could be removed. But there are a significant number of old existing homes that have a lot of bedrooms. They're not gonna have 6 parking spaces for the 6 bedrooms, and they've been rented for 100 years as a short-term rental, and now you're saying you're gonna take that use away from them if they can't meet that standard. That's a taking. I don't know if legally we can do that. With, some cases, I think we're gonna have to grandfather.
Well, I think you'd have to grandfather them, but then based upon the unit selling, they'd have to fall into the new.
Or it could be triggered on change of ownership,
Right.
Yeah,
could be triggered on that.
Right, that one I can agree with, cause
Yeah.
then they know what they're getting into and you're not taking
Right.
what's already existing.
And some people have bought those places as an investment.
Right.
It's not a family owned thing that they've owned for 100 years. Some of these houses have been bought purely for short-term rental purposes. And they've been financed that way and
Right.
based on a business plan.
But
The
those,
town to come in and take that away.
but the problem is those that have been, Mike, those that have been bought that way were bought from a single family house and turned into it, and they've created the problem.
But
Okay,
they
the
have
guy
been allowed-
across,
they've been
But
allowed to
they've been
do it.
allowed, I mean,
Yeah.
you still would address the basement units, they'd have to be addressed.
yeah.
they gotta be addressed.
I think you should probably have a list of criteria of life and safety
Right.
features that
have
not
to
only
be,
we have, but from a marketing standpoint, need to be featured in their marketing photos so that the consumer knows that it has that.
Portland has a
And
good
so that we can
checklist.
verify
You have
it
to
too.
register all rental units for Portland now, and they have, you have to go through it all. They don't
They have a nice table.
inspect, but they say that they're I mean, I don't know, maybe they do, I haven't inspected.
They got a nice table.
They have a self-inspection.
I
I saw,
mean, it's like the Panopticon, they can inspect you at any time, so you have to be in compliance with it, but you have to re-register every year, and they have the radon is another one, I don't know if that's something that you guys wanna put on there, but the gas, the smoke,
Everybody has
all that
radon in
stuff,
town.
yeah, I know. But making sure they're legal bedrooms, things like that. It's a good checklist.
I mean, that's gonna be a hard thing to come up with, is your checklist and all that stuff, but that's gotta be in the ordinance so everybody understands it.
Yes, to make them abide by it. And Old Orchard has that on change of ownership. You have to bring an entire apartment building. And some of them are short-term rentals as well.
Yeah.
But they trigger it by change of ownership.
Well, that would be fine, if you're gonna change an ownership, you gotta bring it up to those standards, but I still think if you're doing short-term rentals, your egress has to be there, no matter
Egress
what.
has to be there,
Or
but
the windows, like you said.
The windows,
Yeah, but
egress
again,
windows
you're
or,
gonna need 24 months to do that.
Yeah, you're separating out units, you need to have the fire escapes or whatever you need to have to make it, yeah. Code. We're gonna have to write out a method for inspecting it
And a criteria when you're in a grandfather situation, what things do they have to do for life safety?
right, that have to be completed.
Yeah, they have to be done within a 24-month period, and then you have to comply with our standards
Right.
upon change of ownership.
You got enough information there now?
Yeah, thanks.
You asked.
You asked.
I know, I've asked on all of these, I needed input on all of these.
So hotel worker,
Yeah, what do you think of that?
I like it.
I got a couple of head nods and one head.
you need to go to 40 hours, not 30. If it's gonna be for a worker, it needs to be a full-time employee, not somebody that comes in and spends so many hours there. and
Well, a
they
lot
go-
of
Full-time
places-
employee is technically 30.
That's what I was.
30.
Yeah, 30.
35, it's,
Nah, 30.
that's the federal standard.
Is it 30, 35 is a federal?
I
'Cause
thought it was 30 or 32.
I thought it was 30.
I
I
mean,
can check.
I would go whatever the federal standard is.
truthfully, most of them are working a lot more hours.
I was just gonna say, it's just
Yeah,
split
but they're not
between
working
two
at their
jobs.
places, they're working at others, so that, because if they work at their places, they have to give them benefits. So they're keeping them the part-time and let them go work somewhere else.
Oh, a lot of the workers that would be here doing, innkeeping work at the
Yep.
hotel, they'll be working at restaurants at night.
Yep.
So, part of the thinking on this would be directly, benefits the hotels. They seem to have a big need for it. But it would help with the restaurant help as well, because they do that at night. A lot of the workers that we have come over from Europe on visas, they work a lot. And some students, some college students that come to this region just to work the summers, same thing, they'll get a hotel job
Right.
during the day, and they'll be working parking cars, valet parking, at all the restaurants, another 20-30 hours.
I think it's so truthfully, it's so hard for the places to get help. I think the 30 hours is fair. I mean, you go to 40 and I get it, they're working the hours, but they're working at two places. The idea is to get them some housing.
I guess, is it worth just going off of whatever the federal standard is for a full-time employee then?
Maybe that's what we should
Maybe we
do.
wanna just find out if it's 30 or 35 or 32,
I wanna say
between
it's-
30 and 38.
Yep, I'll check this.
Pick a number.
Mike, everybody is thought at one time or another about making an actual use of housing for these employees. Maybe we should look into that and let a complex turn from a hotel complex into a facility for housing. However,
They did it in New York.
okay, so if we do that, however, it needs to be closed 6 months a year. That gives you your traveling people to come in, allow them to come in April 1st and be gone November 1st. Closed.
I originally was taking the York ordinance and sort of copying that, but they created a whole overlay district for workforce housing. But the couple of locations that's been applied directly, there was an old hotel on Route 1 that is now, worker housing only.
I'm thinking,
But multiple hotels use it. I was confining our ordinance that it has to be an on-site employee,
yeah, but that doesn't solve the problem for all the workers that we do need, so that's why I say if we turned around, I'll be honest with you, okay? If we turned around and we did that, we made a use which doesn't exist as of right now, okay? And then that use would require the company to house them no more than 2 people in a hotel unit from April 1st through November 1st, and then the facility has to be completely shut down. And then also inspections on the facility to make sure it's
Not 20 people in a room.
not 20 people in a room
And smoke detectors and egress and.
and no children.
So I will tell you, I've done this in Idaho. And it was all employee housing village and you have to be real careful where you put it, cause you ever seen the movie Dirty Dancing?
Yep.
Kind of turned into that.
Well, we're not looking
Like all the
for-
employee
No,
housing.
we're not looking for that. We're looking for a hotel unit. And I can think of 3 that would probably go after it right away. And that would solve the issues for employee housing. But at the same time, I would say that you can't have a family in it. Okay, and no more than two occupants per room.
Like dorm style employee housing.
No, hotel rooms. We have like 5 or 6 real bad hotels that could be brought up very quickly
Yeah.
and meet the ordinance and have the people in there and probably would be very happy to do it.
I mean, the other factor is the college, the way we.
But that's way down the road.
That's down the road.
The dormitory for the college is a great idea and I think it will happen. But in the short term, we do have issues, I mean, they're already doing it, they're renting cottages, they're renting this, they're renting that. There'd be a lot of, if we allowed the hotel to do it and set up as a specific area, okay? And the people you'd have to set it up so that the people have to have a job and be listed on the register where they're working. That way you're not just getting anybody at all in there for 6 months. That's the whole idea of trying to get the employee housing.
And I think, and that was part of our thinking too, was, checking documentation and it makes it easy if they're staying at the hotel they're working at, because we're just asking for a check stub.
I think
Prove they're
you could-
employee.
You could do both.
When you go to the, one site and you have multiple hotels and restaurants and other businesses that are all coming to, how do we track that?
But you could do both.
I
We need
checked
so
with-
much
I
employee
checked with
housing,
with York because when they first started off, and I don't know, they may have resolved it, that was where the majority of their police calls were going.
Yes, and I know that happened there too. They had the one older hotel that they did with just employee housing. And that multiple
Well-
businesses were using it and, it became an issue.
But were they employees that were in there or were they just people staying there?
Well, that was a mix of that too.
That's the issue. You gotta make sure that they're specifically employees that are here for 6 months.
Working in the town of Wells.
Working in the town of Wells, not just using,
But how often are you checking that
See,
they're still
that's,
employed?
and that's
I-
enforcement wise and
again,
check wise.
that's why that's why again, we need that position of a lodging facilities enforcement officer.
I know, man.
But again, how are
This
you
would be
checking,
worker housing.
how often are you checking
Right.
that? Are you checking that
I think this
once
is
a
a
month,
good
twice a
start.
month?
Exactly. This
Right.
would be
Once
good
a
to
year.
start. Yeah.
It's January, it's a
Yeah.
good start.
No, it is, it's a good start, you get this passed and you work out additional
get your
changes for the
thing.
next time, I mean, you gotta get something on here.
That's why I think you need to look at doing a whole hotel, cause I know one hotel will do it immediately, and it's not a bad hotel.
I get what you're
Jimmy's.
saying, this is a good, but this,
Oh, yeah.
He'd do it immediately.
you were saying?
No, next to the Hampton, the little small one.
Oh, the small one there.
I mean, he'd do that immediately, I guarantee you that. The wave on it, yeah. I mean, that would be,
It's the one we do.
Well, what prevents him from doing that now?
he does, but not
Because
legally.
that has to be on public, it can't be for.
That's
If an
separated
employee
enough
went
if
there
it
and
turned
stayed
into
there less than
Dirty
28
Dancing that night.
days and
Oh, right, he is that limit of 28 days, right?
Yeah, so that's why I think that you know, if we looked at that, it would solve the problem multiple ways. We could give them, you know, the hotels if they want, I mean, one for every 10 rooms.
But you're focusing on the hotels, what I'm saying is, this is good language for the hotels. What I'm saying is, if you wanna adopt language for the, say that building there, to just do it, cause that would give the restaurants an opportunity too.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is you do both, this is
Yeah,
good.
no, I'm saying both.
Okay, alright.
I'm not saying just one, I'm saying let's add the hotel in at the
Yeah.
same time. But again, you have to say, like
But
we
you have
did
to have good
before,
guidelines on
there
it.
there are none as of now. They have to come to you could actually do it in staff review, I think, cause all they're gonna do is bring in a new plan and tell you what they're doing. I don't know if you can get away with that or not. You're not gonna make them go through any changes big.
Something like that, I would suggest going through planning board on.
Okay, have them bring it to the
Yeah,
planning board.
Well, plus you have to make sure that
Changing the use.
building's up to code on everything and everything
They're
else.
gonna have to have that as part of the inspection, that's why I say, but I mean, if you did that, you'd be able to get the hotels and the restaurants some extra places for their employees, which everybody's crying for right now, we all know that.
If they had a way, that on-site office that's there for lodging, if there was someone there, management wise, that could, when the code office stops by, they could say who's in every room and who they work for.
Well, I should think that the
There'd have to be
restaurants,
some oversight.
right, I should think that the restaurants and hotels would have to be held accountable for registering their people there.
Mhm.
And providing proof that they're actually working for them that many hours a week.
And there'd have to be someone on
What about
site.
that?
You know what, you have to have the restaurant or the hotel, or whoever they're working for,
Well, that's the problem.
register them.
The code office or that new position can't go running around to every restaurant.
No,
saying,
but their records
but
would
if
have to
there
be
was-
at that location.
Yeah, they gotta be at the
exactly.
location.
And they'd have- you could certainly develop one central unified form that the hotels and restaurants would fill out.
Mhm.
And provide the details of how many hours they worked that week and everything
Yes.
else. And that could be on file at the hotel.
But you'd have to have someone there on site to
Yeah,
manage
you
it.
still have to have somebody to manage
It's still
it.
To watch out for the, situation you
Yeah,
were describing.
it's still gonna be run.
Oversight, some
Yeah.
like in college and RA.
Yeah, 24 hours a day, you'd have to have somebody there.
Yeah, it's still gonna be run like
Yes.
the situation, but I mean, it would solve a lot of problems.
Mhm.
For what everybody's looking for, because right now, I mean, they're all over town, we already know that.
Yeah.
You know, and having them all in one location might be better than sprinkled everywhere.
Or it might be more dangerous, I don't know.
Yeah.
But you could also put some.
But as long as there's oversight,
Right,
and
as long as it's oversight, you could also have some guidelines that says a police call requires expulsion.
Mhm.
There's nothing that
Yep.
says you can't do that.
Yep.
So. I think this is good, I think you just add a new section.
well, that'd be a whole other new use and,
Yeah,
but yeah. but-
Yeah, but that's not a problem.
I mean, we need it badly, so.
Accessory dwelling units.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? I originally had a much more limited edited version, just to meet the new state LD 2003. But then, I started, talking to the code office about it and it expanded a little. And I took some language from other towns' ordinances. And we are, the Board of Selectmen are having a workshop with the town attorney on accessory dwelling units. I think maybe on the 21st even. So we'll get input from the town attorney. I wrote this myself, I haven't
So,
had town attorney input on it yet, and the Board of Selectmen have been talking to the town attorneys about what direction they wanna go in. And I don't know what that direction is yet.
so what I'd like to see you do is go from 600 square feet up to 850 square feet.
A lot of towns do 750 or 800.
Yeah, I think you need to go up that, however,
I mean, that'll encourage one bedroom, a two bedroom versus one bedroom.
you can get 2 bedrooms in the way you worded it anyways.
Very tight in
No,
600
it's not,
square
I can
foot.
show you 400 units that are like that.
Yes, I know.
So-
It's still tight, but
So what I'd like to see is up to 800, I would like to see that it can have a deck, but it cannot have a porch or 3-season room. Because that's just going to allow it to become whatever size that porch or 3-season room is, it can have a deck.
that's sort of, yeah, we did I think we put a deck allowance in of a certain square footage.
Yeah, but it cannot be a three-season porch or a screened-in porch because they become rooms.
The space heater, it's just finished space.
They don't have to, all you have to do is open up the doors and the heating systems inside are enough to bring it up to temperature.
Currently, anything with a roof would count, but currently, we don't address decks at all. So
Nope.
you could have a 600 square foot unit and a 600 square foot deck, and right now, someone can do that.
Yeah,
So
well,
the big problem there is the town and the DEP have two different ideas of what constitutes a dwelling, a living space.
Oh, yes, they do. So in the dune zone,
Yeah.
yes.
so you just need to word it that you can't have an enclosed porch. Okay, if it is, that the enclosed porch can't have access to the unit. Now, in other words, somebody's got an enclosed porch for the main house,
That counts towards a square foot.
that counts to the main house, but the ADU can't have access to that porch or else now that's living space that they actually have.
Oh, if it's connected, yes.
If it's connected
Yeah.
in any way.
Yes.
Well, the ADU has to be connected to the house.
Yeah, but in other words, you don't want them going from the house onto the porch.
I get it.
I mean, that was how cottages became bigger than they really are.
So
But you also have to make sure this is in line with what the select board is thinking.
Yes, and I haven't got their.
That's the first step.
Yeah, and I haven't got their input yet. We sort of drafted this up, the code office and I did, and we wanted to get some input from you, but
Yeah.
I wanna defer a lot of comments on this until after we get the town attorney and board of selectmen input on
Right, I
it.
think you
Yeah.
need that.
They may have different thoughts.
Because, I mean, we could just be spinning wheels here rather than
I
getting
think,
too long discussion on this.
I think you should bring up to the fact though that the unit should be bigger.
Mhm.
Alright, because I mean, as long as they meet the 1.1 parking space per bedroom, that's not a big deal. 800 square feet is, gives, we're looking to be affordable housing for people is what we're looking to do. And trying to shove somebody into 600 square feet is awful small.
the Mike,
And like I said, a lot of other towns are
Yep.
750 and 800. There are lots still at 600 too, cause that was like an old standard.
Yep.
one question I had is in the first line here, you say an accessory dwelling is permitted when the one family dwelling is occupied by the owner.
Absolutely.
So right now, there's a ton of them where the accessory dwelling unit is occupied by the owner and the other is not.
Oh, that's a great, yeah, do we wanna allow that or not? York allows that, where the owner can be in the accessory unit and rent out the house.
That's
Yeah,
what
that's fine.
happens now.
Even if the property's occupied by the
Yeah, the owner lives on the property.
Owner has
Yeah.
to live there.
So it wouldn't matter which unit.
Yeah, I don't think it matters.
Yeah, our current one is,
They could probably get more rent for renting the house
Right.
section anyway.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah, and I didn't really think about, our current ordinance, it has to be in the primary, the
But-
larger one.
Yeah.
But when reviewing other towns in York especially, it's like York
I
didn't
mean,
care which one they
but
were.
here's-
You could be at the point where you have a widow or a widower.
Mhm, yep.
Saying, okay, I can go in the accessory dwelling unit, I can get my income by renting out the house.
right.
Yeah, but
Yes.
here's where your other problem's gonna run into that. People are gonna put the ADU on, the owner's gonna move into that, and then she's gonna do an Airbnb out of the main house. That's gotta be stopped. Because accessory dwellings are not to make rental for Airbnbs. That was the big conversation that they had that night.
Yeah, cause if it qualified.
No, it doesn't qualify, that's the issue. The accessory dwelling was supposed to be long-term rentals,
Right.
It's
not
supposed to-
short-term.
Right, and it has to be accessory to a dwelling,
That's right.
not accessory to a short-term rental.
So what's the definition of that? And here it says it's not to be utilized as a short-term residential rental, so
Yep.
it can be 31-day rentals?
No, it shouldn't be. It should be,
I mean, we just defined short-term
If we
rentals
define it
as 30 days.
it would be,
Right, so
So you might just need to change that to change the language in this.
6-month minimum or 12, what do we?
you could put separate language in ADU on it on how many months. Right?
yeah, cause right now it would be anything greater than 30 days, could be an
We're
ADU.
using the same language, so it
If
has
someone
to,
rented for 60 days, it wouldn't be a short-term rental, it would still be an ADU.
if they rented for 31 days, it
let's
would be a
call it-
short-term rental.
Let's call it a 12-month rental. That any property that uses an ADU can only be rented out at a 12-month rate.
Or you could say no more than 2 leases per year or something like that, like they do in some of the like down in Florida or something. You can have no more than 2 leases per year. So if you wanna do a 3-month and then 6-month or 1 4-month and that's it or something.
That would give a lot more flexibility.
Yeah, they could rent it during the summer and have the family come back for the winter.
I don't know if you wanna restrict the timeline for each of those leases, but you can restrict the number of leases.
Yeah, but the whole idea between this new ADU law is to get full-time housing.
Right.
Not make
That's
somebody
it.
rent,
Well,
not
yeah.
make, well, not make somebody's rentals, and that's what you're doing by allowing them less than a year rental at a time.
Cause it was all about affordable housing.
Affordable housing, so you wanna turn around and you wanna make it so that if somebody's gonna put an ADU in, they have to rent either the ADU or the main house for a minimum of 12 months, a minimum of 12 months, and then if they wanna go to a month, that's fine, because they've already been there 12 months.
So the owner must live on the property in one or the other, and there can be one lease on one or the other, and it has to be a minimum of 12 months. You can't lease
12 months
both.
at a time.
Please.
No, you can't lease both, because the
Yeah.
owner has to live on the property.
Yeah, the owner has to be there.
Yes.
Now, how does that handle snowbirds?
You guys just ruined it. Let's be honest, you guys just took it up,
They can't
cause at
do
that
it.
point, they gotta rent it for a whole year.
No,
But if someone
I'm
owns
talking
the
about,
house,
I'm
they
a
can-
snowbird,
Yep.
I'm living in the ADU.
You're technically renting it.
I'm going to Florida for 6
So
months,
the ADU is vacant for 6 months
The
and you're
ADU is
getting rental
vacant,
income on the house.
and I'm getting rental income in the
Well,
house, which is fine,
Where's your legal residence?
in Florida.
No.
Then you're not a legal
Not a
resident.
legal resident.
Yeah.
So you,
That's one thing that we have language in there about
okay, that's fine.
ownership. But yeah, I didn't wanna go, I wanted to get some good input like you gave, but I didn't wanna go too far with it until we have a workshop with the board of selectmen.
And then affordable housing.
Affordable housing, I took our existing and Shane and I worked on it and the criteria for lot size reduction is the same as we have right now. We just reformatted it into a sub-paragraph form, thought it was easier to read. But the difference for LD 2003 for that was we already had affordable housing allowances and higher density. And ours allowed it to go 2 times the allowable density, and the new state law goes 2.5 times. So that was the main change there.
Okay, what about parking?
Parking is the other one that the state, says that we can only require 2 parking spaces for every 3 dwellings.
What?
Exactly.
No way,
It says the
how are
minimum
people gonna
parking.
get there?
2 parking for what?
2 parking at maximum, the maximum we can require for parking is 2 parking spaces for every 3 dwellings.
This
Huh?
says the minimum, you say E, the minimum parking required shall be 2 spaces for every 3 dwelling units.
Well, yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's what we can require,
So,
can't require, it's like a minimum setback, someone can have more than that, they can come in with more, and we'd encourage them to do so, but we can't restrict it to a higher number than that.
I think if you look at affordable housing, you're not gonna find, the affordable housing is gonna be out that end of town, it's not gonna be down here, so.
Well, that was the problem I brought up at the Board of Selectmen
it
meeting.
can't be done.
Exactly, well, if you're in a city, yeah, because you have street parking, you have public buses, you have public transportation in a city and you have municipal parking along the roads. That, it could work in that condition, but that's not us, we don't have that.
How can it possibly be done like?
So.
That's
how
what
many-
LD
how many
2003
bedrooms in a dwelling?
requires.
So they say the minimum required parking should be 2 spaces for every 3 dwelling units. That's their exact wording?
Yes.
Well, they really don't know what they're doing, do they?
No, that was one of the biggest aspects of this part of the LD 2003 that I just, it's meant for a city, it's not meant for a town.
We can't change that?
Well, actually, the representative that was here at the workshop with the Board of Selectmen, he had mentioned an appeal process. I had vaguely heard of an appeal process, but I didn't see any rulemaking on it. So I do wanna explore that with the town attorney to see if there's exceptions that can be made to the state law. I don't know who grants the appeal, I don't know who it goes to, who approves it, but that requirement just doesn't make any sense for a town like ours.
So we also have down here 33%, 33 1/3% of the lot size reduced. So if you have a 20,000 square foot lot in the RA district, you can reduce that down to 7,000 square, 6,500 square
33.
feet?
A third of that, so if it's 20,000 square foot, it can go down to 15,000?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, around there, yeah, a little less than that.
Well, you better change the wording on this, cause the wording says the minimum lot size may be reduced up to 33 1/3.
Right.
Yeah, so it can be reduced, that's the maximum that it can be reduced.
Okay.
And that's if you're on sewer and water. It's a 20% reduction
If you're not.
if you're not.
I mean, nobody's ever gonna build this.
Well,
Fine, it's
we've had
affordable.
this ordinance in place for 30 years and no one's built this.
Nobody's ever gonna build it, because the lots are too expensive.
Yeah.
That, we're just referencing the state statute. And they define it in the state statute.
You gotta find out about that parking.
I don't know what that number is.
Yeah.
Cause I know
That's
our
the town
numbers and, yeah, I brought those.
I mean, this is just a dream, there's nobody gonna build these in the town of Wells, I mean,
And there was a, both, we have a separate part of the ordinance that allowed it. And it's, like I said, it's been in place since at least 93. No one's done one. We also had those big density bonuses under our previous cluster subdivision.
and nobody did it.
allowances. No one ever did.
Right.
The only time that affordable housing actually got implemented was when it was an exemption from the growth ordinance. The growth permitting that was in place in like the early 2000s.
Yep.
And those were exempt from growth permitting. So if a project did a certain percentage of the units as affordable, then they exempted all their permits out of that.
But they were never listed to be affordable forever.
They all are.
Forest North, we've got a bunch of them that,
Yes, Forest North has a whole bunch and they have
Yep.
not changed any of them. They have asked if they could change them, and there's been another one on Riverbend, Casper Gas projects, where some of them were done affordable. And they've asked to get that released and it's bound up in the either condo docs or homeowner association docs and yeah, we've taken amendment to the subdivision plan to do it.
Good.
As far as I know, I don't know if some people have sold them for more than their caps.
that's what I'm saying.
You could give these guys 40% coverage and it'd be a perfect spot for that.
Yeah. So Mike, on the final plan for major subdivision. Number 15, it says, it's the second paragraph, but the main stormwater management design manual volumes 1, 2, and 3.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Or another methodology, I would also put or current edition of the main stormwater management design. You're saying 1, 2, and 3, they could issue number 4 next year and then we're stuck.
Mhm.
Right, and then you have the same thing on the back page, you had written, first paragraph, management design manual volume 2, then you say current edition, but it should say or current edition.
Mhm.
Okay, just wanna make sure we're always saying whatever the current edition is at the time.
Should be adopted. Do they adopt that?
DEP does.
So I would say adopted.
Adopted, yep, that's fine, just as long as we,
Yeah, current adopted edition.
right,
Current adopted.
yeah, you just wanna make sure we catch that in all places.
Yeah.
Cause we've got tricked up on stuff like that before.
And the big change there is going from 25 years going to 50 years.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you why you can do 100.
And
What happened to the 100 year?
No one knows what a
That comes
100-year
every-
storm is
that
right now,
comes
that's the
constantly.
problem.
But we had talked about it a long time, I think we discussed going to 50 years from our current,
How many 100-year storms did we have last year?
none.
No time for one, right?
Actually, that's a common thing that people throw out there, we have 100-year storms every couple of months now.
Oh, we don't.
And statistically, that's not a true statement.
I know.
Right, we had a 50-year storm.
Yeah,
So that's good, 50 years, good.
and a lot of towns, other towns do 50 years.
Yep. Yep.
Oh, the other element of that, and hadn't talked to to you, I don't think about it, was, cause it's come up on a couple of subdivisions the last couple of years, is foundation drains. We have some subdivisions that get engineered, and the engineer labels all the foundation drains and shows where they're going. A lot of times they tie into the stormwater system. But under the building code, you can do a gravity foundation drain, or you can use a sump pump, and you can pump to somewhere else too. And we had a recent subdivision where the developer, put the homes in grade. The water table this spring was really, really high. Basements were flooding, some pumps were going on for like a month at a time and they were burning out. And so basements got flooded, so there were a lot of issues, and it's happened before too, but not to the extent it did last spring.
Would that be the one that was built in a sand pit?
Yes, that's the one, yes, yeah, that is the one. You know what I'm talking about. So, yeah, what do you think of having a requirement that at the approval and subdivision stage, they have to show how they can provide gravity foundation drains for all the homes?
And I would require them to have check valves, because you don't want as the water table to come up, everything from the outside flowing back.
In, right?
Yeah, the only problem with that, Mike, is if you have there's not many subdivisions down on the Drake's Island, but you can't build a house down there without a sump pump in it. It's impossible.
Oh, you can still put one, well,
Now you're doing gravity drainage, which means,
Gravity foundation drain, but that's different than a sump pump.
you can still have a sump pump
Yeah.
as well. for
you can have
emergency
a
situations.
sump pump too?
Yes,
Okay, because
yeah. Code office asked me that very question, they, Jodine asked you, they can only do, I said, no, you could always have a sump pump as well, for that really extreme condition. But on most cases, you have a foundation drain that'll work. The thought was like on a project like 88 Burnt Mill, Mia Lane that we're doing currently, that development's gonna have no basements because you couldn't put one, and you can't have a gravity drain. So on other subdivisions, we have made them put a condition that they can't have basements. But then sometimes there's crawl spaces and other things that get done
If you keep
instead.
talking, I'm gonna need a motion to extend the meeting.
Yeah,
Oh my goodness,
yes, you need a motion to extend.
no, this is it, right? Last one.
it's the longest one I think we've had.
Yeah?
No, it's not.
It is, we've.
No, we've extended it one night.
Sorry, Tina, this isn't usual. Your sidewalk on Saturday wasn't usual, the snow, and this isn't usual either.
Okay, you've got the development workshop and review.
Yeah, we had Amy's Bagel Cafe, the old building across from the elementary school, came in for an amendment.
Didn't that come through the planning board first?
Yeah, it did.
Yep.
So
Oh,
why,
way back,
Yeah.
so why did it go to the staff review?
As the addition was small enough.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the thresholds for staff review after a 5-year period is 6,000 square foot view lot coverage. And when they go beyond that, it's gonna be different.
Then make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor? Thank you and good night, folks.
Sorry, time flies.